Great. Well, good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 0907. And I'd like to acknowledge that the District of Tofino operates within the territory of the Tla-o-qui-aht First Nation, and we are grateful for that. I'd also like to indicate that there is a notice to attendees that the meeting is being video recorded and will be published on the District of Tofino's YouTube channel. And notice to virtual attendees to sign up for public comments and question period using the Q&A function in Zoom. To register, participants are required to enter their full name, residential address, and the agenda item they wish to speak to. So this morning, we need an approval of the meeting location. My recommendation is that pursuant to Section 15 of the District of Tofino Meeting Procedure Bylaw number 1229/2016 as amended, that February 15, 2024 regular meeting be held electronically via Zoom and live broadcast on the District of Tofino's YouTube channel, and that the facility provided for the public to watch and hear the meeting is located at Municipal Hall 380 Campbell Street in Tofino, British Columbia.
Second.
Thank you. Any debate on this one? I highly doubt. So all those in favor? Wonderful. Motion carried. I would like to make a recommendation that the February 15th, 2024 special council agenda be adopted. Thank you, Councillor Sawyer. All those in favor? Wonderful. Motion carried. I'm just looking over to Manus there to see if there is any public comment at this point in time. Is there any of the public around right now?
We have one member of the public attending via Zoom. So I will do a call for comments to council now. If they would like to make a comment to council, you need to state your name, your address, and the agenda item you're speaking to. Calling once, calling twice, calling 3 times, and no questions or no comments at this point.
Wonderful. Seeing no questions from the public, we can move on with presentations and reports today. And I'm going to look across the room and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Councillor Stere. For those of you that I haven't had an opportunity to meet, my name is Lisa Landry. I'm here at the district in a temporary capacity in this super busy time of budget. Yeah, I'll be leading us through and also the directors as well through the budget. Yep, we'll just wait for the PowerPoint to come up.
Okay, we may just need a few minutes of a.
So I'll look to council. Let's take a 2-minute recess till the passenger pigeons are fed. And I think we're getting there. Mayor Law, you can hear us and you can see us. So not bad. It's 9:17. We're ready to get rolling here. Thank you, Lisa, for your patience. And please, we got agenda item 5.1.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Thank you very much. This is our roadmap for today. We broke it into 3 sections, as you can see, because we do have a lot to cover today. The first section is a number of follow-ups from the December 15th meeting. 2 in particular that we want to speak to in this first section, and that's parking and also the Growing Communities Fund as well. And we'll roll through the other grants as well. And then in the second section, directors will update on their areas and their projects and their operating budgets. Council has already seen quite a bit of this in December the 5th, so we're only going to really touch on changes or new information from December the 5th. At about 11 o'clock, I think we're anticipating the ACRD to come in to do their presentation. So we'll pause for that. And then we'll have another break and in our third section, a deep dive into the financial plan. Okay, so we are here February 15th. This is our second budget meeting. Then we have our third and final draft number 3 will be coming up in March, and we'll be bringing bylaws in April in time for adoption for the May 15th deadline. Just a quick recognition of the public engagement event that we had in January. We had our event on January 30th. 6 people attended. We had 22 signboards, and staff and elected officials were there. Questions were asked by the public and were all addressed by staff and elected officials at the event. Okay, our first follow-up from December the 5th. There was a lot of discussion on December 5th. There was a calculation error in the 2023 budget, and it generated a lot of questions on the December 5th meeting. So staff thought we'd bring it back for a bit of a comprehensive view and walk through it now. Kind of talk about the chronology of 2023 and what happened, and what the actual results were, and where we want to go from here. So let's get started. So this is a bit of a chronology of kind of what happened in 2023. So the beaches contract started in 2021. So we had a full year of in 2022 for beaches. And then in 2023, there was discussions about developing a downtown section of the parking program. It was in the development stages. So at that point, staff took that original contract and parsed it into two, part to go to beaches and part to go to downtown. This is where the error occurred. What actually happened in 2023 was, of course, the beaches and Muni lot were still their own contract. Downtown came in with its own contract, with its own costs and its own revenues. You can see along the bottom here, I've got a tracker on what the contract costs are, because now we have two contracts to keep them both straight. Along with that contract total along the bottom, I just want to clarify that the contract is the parking management contract with Robbins. So that's the staffing, the kiosks, and those sorts of things. There are other costs, and we'll see that in a minute. We've got it all labeled out. But there are other costs. There's costs, the credit card fees that we pay to the credit card companies, and also the 5.5% incentive fee on revenues that we pay to Robbins. So just for simplicity right now, we're just talking about that parking management contract, just so you can follow what happened. And in 2024, we're now formulating the budget, and staff sat down and thought, okay, what happened in 2023 and how can we prevent this from happening again? How this won't happen again is that we're looking to have one consolidated contract in 2024 to reflect the fact that it is one program, to have the economies of scale that you see with one contract and reducing that confusion of dealing with two contracts. So that's the first area that's going to be that staff are really focusing on. We also have historical results now, whereas earlier we didn't have numbers for downtown for 2023. There were no historical benchmarks to look to. As well, staff, both myself and Aaron, are going through with two sets of eyes to go through and see what's going on, what's going to go into the financial plan. We've developed revenue projections ourselves apart from Robbins. And then we can compare to Robbins estimates to sense check. So let's take a look now at the 2023 results. This is the beaches and the municipal lot. This is everything all in. So I'll just walk through those numbers. So we've got parking revenues. Other is the permits and violations, parking violations. And then you'll see parking contract. Now this number is a bigger number than the one you saw on the last slide, because this also includes the 5.5% incentive fee. So that's all in there. The other costs for $51,000, that's cellular, internet connectivity, hydro, professional fees, and the credit card fees as well, the contract, the credit card transaction fees. And then site costs are just infrastructure and signage and those sorts of things. I don't think I need to remind anybody that 2023 was not a normal year. We had an unprecedented event with the Cameron Bluffs wildfire and Highway 4 being closed, and it had a huge impact on visitation and also on this program. It's important to realize that we need to look at these results with that lens. And so if we were to, the biggest impact for the beaches was June, July. And so if we substitute those 2023 results for June and July, sub them out with what we saw in 2022's June and July, this is what a normalized year might look like. I'll just pause there for a minute. Okay. Downtown. Downtown is next. It was even more heavily impacted by the closure. Downtown was just starting at that time. The equipment was bought, costs were underway, but the revenue stream had not been set up by the time this program, by the time the road closures happened. In fact, when you look at the results for downtown, we had essentially no revenues for May, no revenues for June, and only really half of July. So it's, I want to really emphasize it's misleading to draw conclusions on these numbers, knowing what we know. We can't just take these numbers at face value. We need to account for what happened. And so if we take the August actuals that we had for downtown and backcast them to what May, June, and the rest of July might look like, these are closer to what we would have if we normalized 2023. Wow. Oh, right. Maybe we'll just pause there and just see if there's any questions about parking or, yeah.
I
Please,
just
Councillor
had a
Stere.
question about, talking about how last year was not a normal year, comparing to, 2022, 21 visitation.
Yeah.
However, I think what we're seeing is that we are in a downturn year right now. So the numbers that most businesses are seeing are more comparable to like 2018, 2019. So I'm just wondering if we're taking that into account.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Sawyer. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. We are seeing that, there will be ebb and flow. And so we're looking at a range that includes some amount of potential visitation downturn as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. And I should have said through the chair.
So I do have a quick question. Well, they're not quick. One of the interesting things that I'm noting is you're looking at the consolidation of the contracts between Robbins, and one of the things that stands out for me is the amount of that contract. And I'm wondering, within those conversations in the consolidation process, you did have a number there that was slightly reduced from the two separate contracts of approximately $40,000. Plus, there's also that revenue incentive sharing with them as well, which accounts for what could be a significant portion of revenue as well. So I'm wondering, within those conversations for that consolidated contract, is the negotiated process that goes through with that, is there ways to look at, because we can't anticipate things like Cameron Bluff fires, in essence, to have that contract visited and look at reductions, potential reductions within that contract to see what the service delivery is from them, and if there are ways that we can reduce that contract fee and or the revenue sharing percentage.
Certainly, yeah. The district is actually currently in negotiations with Robbins as we speak. We've been looking through, Robbins provided their cost estimates and staff have crawled all over those. And had a number of meetings with Robin to go through what's reasonable. And as well, we're questioning, or at least we're developing our own revenue estimates, completely separate and apart, and then comparing and sense checking. So yeah, so that work is underway.
Thank you.
Good stuff. Okay, France.
Sorry, maybe just one more. Did the costs of the kiosks and signs and infrastructure that we put in, was that in the other costs that you had up there?
That the cost of the kiosks and the signage is in the infrastructure line, but the cost for the kiosks, amortizing those costs, that's in the parking management line item. Yeah. And so we do anticipate that when those assets are amortized over, say, 3 years, then we would see those numbers coming down. Yeah, we understand that there's those units have like a 10-year life cycle, maybe even longer. Yeah. Okay, our second big follow-up for December the 5th was for the Growing Communities Fund. There was some discussion on December the 5th, and we thought that maybe we would make some time right now for council to have a discussion about their priorities for the grant for the Growing Communities Fund. So just as background for council, we received $1.9 million last year. It was put in a reserve and was invested, and so we're currently at a balance of about $2 million for that. The objective of this fund from the province is that it increases the local housing supply through investments in infrastructure or amenities. And so some of the examples that they have provided is drinking water, affordable housing, recreational amenities. So I think council wanted to have a bit more of a fulsome discussion on this. And staff are looking for council direction. So let's make time now for council to maybe have that discussion. And maybe I can invite Nyla up to help facilitate that council discussion. This is a draft list of possibilities, but it's not a definitive list by any man. This is part of just to see the discussion.
Thank you, Lisa. So if council recalls at the December 5th meeting, staff brought forward a project sheet on the Bay Street water treatment upgrades where a significant portion or actually 100% of the Growing Communities Fund was allocated to that project. So we went back and did some more work on the allocation for that project. And you'll see later on during Mr. Rogers' presentation that we've reduced the contribution from the Growing Communities Fund to just over $1 million. With that being said, that project remains grant dependent. There's an unknown source of funds to make up that difference. And we'll get into detail on that later. And I don't want to distract council from this conversation. A couple other areas that staff have identified to utilize these funds is showing here in the table. And we just wanted to put these forward to help with today's discussion. As we talked about at the last meeting, the community recreation facility will require a portion from the District of Tofino if that grant opportunity is successful. So that's sort of one area of consideration. And that's more of a discussion about whether we would want to contribute to the recreation facilities reserve, which we've established to move some of those paid parking surplus funds into. Another area is ball field upgrades, and that's a partnership project with SD70. We're going to have more detailed discussion on that later on in the presentation. But that's sort of one area that staff are looking to utilize some of those, either those paid parking surplus funds or perhaps a contribution from here. Without council knowing that value at this stage, we may need to come back to this discussion at the end of the presentation, but we wanted to open it up for some discussion here and now as well. And then we have the air filling station for the Tofino Volunteer Fire Department. That was an approved project in the 2023 financial plan. It was allocated to come from taxation revenue, but given today's budget is not balanced, we're looking for other sources of funds for some of these projects. And we're recommending to move the air filling stations to come from the Growing Communities Fund rather than taxation in an effort to help us balance the financial plan. And that last item there saying other is an opportunity for council to weigh in. We've provided council with the parameters of this funding at the last meeting and talked a little bit about it today. Lisa certainly has those parameters available today if you require further clarity. But maybe we'll just pause here and open the discussion up to council. Then I'll sit down and I'll let Lisa take over there. Thank you.
Great night. Maybe in a format that might work well in terms of that conversation and to give council a couple of seconds to look over and to maybe think of what those potentials in the other category might be. But if we did maybe just start on one end, work to the other and have a generalized conversation on this, and then we can hopefully maybe give a little bit of direction to staff in terms of moving forward. So I was staring right at you, Ali, Councillor Sawyer. Why don't you begin?
Yeah, I think seeing those options, it's tough knowing that the air filling station is on that list, although it's certainly critical. I understand why it is because of the budget. I do feel though that first and foremost in my mind is the water treatment upgrades, seeing as houses growing community and our focus is on housing. I think that having any upgrades to our water system will allow us to approve, you know, development that is already occurring and to have housing built that can be serviced.
I feel that water is obviously hugely important. Going forward, it's going to be the most important. But I feel like there's been a lack in recreation opportunities here. So I feel like that's kind of almost getting caught up to maintain our livability within our community. So I feel like that's a really valuable area of contribution.
I see putting a little bit everywhere, with, of course, water and recreation emphasize. I think, we could fully fund the filling station, maybe have 100,000 or something each towards the ball fields, and the other would be affordable housing or to something like that, maybe some funds that the housing corporation could access. I'm not sure if that's quite what we want to do with it, but something in the realm of housing.
Great, maybe I'll go up to Mayor Law.
Thank you, Chair Stere. Through the chair, I'm happy with $1 million going to the Bay Street water treatment plant. I think that came up before, and I'm happy to see that. We'll see that later on. I'm happy to see a portion of this go to the recreation facility reserve, with as long as that reserve is somewhat flexible. And so I would say 500 grand, just off the top of my head, seems reasonable. I think the ball field upgrades with ST70, I think that's a great option for a contribution. We'll see where that funding lands later on, but I'd be happy to see the remaining 500,000 split up to go to ball field upgrades or other recreation things. I know that later on we'll see, perhaps there's some recreation studies that the council has brought up that we may need to review and pivot to. And so I would like to see a portion of this reserved, as Councillor Sloman says, to amenities. And my rationale for that is, we're lacking in amenities for the existing housing stock and population. So I think that needs to be addressed. And I'm happy to see some of this go to the volunteer fire department for an air filling station and have a real, unburdening of the tax cost for that. That's where I stand. So $1,500,000 or so plus air filling station.
Thomas?
I pretty much agree with what everybody else is saying. I think this is a good breakdown. I'm happy to see the air filling station on there, and that's easily absorbed by this, even if we look at the fact that it made like 50 grand in interest. So that's not unburdening anything else that we had set as a priority already. I know recreation's been important as a focus for this, but I'm very happy to see half of it go towards water.
I'd say we've definitely got to put something towards the ball fields. It's difficult without having a figure there, but I think that's high importance within the community at the moment. Having attended the housing summit, everybody's talking about infrastructure deficit yet again. And I think it's remiss of us if we don't put a large chunk of money towards our Bay Street water upgrade. And then I'd support the air filling station for the fire department.
Great, and I think pretty much between all the conversations, I would be, the only question I had in terms of the kind of the larger question, absolutely around the ball fields, those conversations with SD70, we might get a more accurate understanding of what those contributions might be from there. And so once we have that idea, we can apply what I would like that access, if if it isn't as much as we're thinking, that goes towards the water treatment upgrades there. Certainly support the air filling station to remove that from taxation. I think is important. We've identified that as a need. Certainly the volunteer fire department has indicated that as well. And there might even be some revenue potential because I know there's a federal agency here that requires their bottles being filled. Anyways, I digress. And so that being said, the only other thing I just wanted to mention, we are going to be, and it is in the budget for this year and extending into 2025, is a Parks and Trail and Recreation strategic plan in essence. And I think there might be opportunity within there as well. I think the ball fields need to be done ASAP, but I think it's an area to have a much more comprehensive understanding of where we're going to be going into the future, to be able to give us a little bit more direction. We've identified recreation as a priority for the community. We know that's an amenity that hasn't been fully realized in our community. But I think we do need to be strategic about how we approach it. And I think that the beginnings of that, I believe, are starting. I'm looking over at April. That is going to be beginning in 2024. And that's going to be a question later on. But I'll leave it there. But I think everything that council has said works extremely well.
Can I just ask yourself or staff, I mean, when we refer to ball field upgrades, what do we actually mean? I mean, is it just baseball? Is it soccer? Do we have a plan yet?
So what I may do is reserve that those details for a little bit later on when April presents, which was pretty quick here, and then come back to this discussion on growing communities, because without that number, I think it's challenging for council to give very clear direction. So we'll move this slide out to later in the presentation and come back to it.
I mean, I'd like to see the number. I'd like to see what's going to be done with that number.
That's right. We have that for you today.
And Councillor McMaster, it leads to the conversation around having a strategic approach to it, because there are other potential fields within the district. I think of Berkeley area as an example.
Yeah.
Oh, Mayor Law, sorry, can't.
Sorry, I don't know if you can see. You've got full.
The box is really small on there, but we don't want to up the slide. But thank you for seeing that.
I just want to agree with everything that council said, Chair, and I do just want to stress the importance of remaining flexible with the recreation funding. That I think it's important that we do it, but remain flexible. We may have to pivot sooner or later, but keep the focus on recreation, although that may look different as we go forward. So that would be my one request, is that any funds for the recreation facility or other recreation projects remain flexible enough to pivot. That's all I want to say. Perhaps that's more of a question for CAO Atiana.
Sure, through the chair, I can respond to that. And certainly that recreation facilities reserve was set up to ensure that there was flexibility, and it's not specific to any particular project. So before we do any movement of funds and finalize how these funds will be allocated, we'll just confirm with council the direction there. So I think that really speaks to the importance of bringing this discussion back at the end of today's meeting, or perhaps before we do the deeper dive and just sort of solidify where we want to go. I think it's important to mention that the Growing Communities funding sits in a reserve fund on its own. And until we actually expend those funds or make very clear decisions on where to move those, they would sit in that reserve fund until council wants to access them. If there is a deliberate move to transfer some of those funds from that reserve to the recreation facilities reserve, that would restrict it in terms of recreation facilities only. But that reserve fund is flexible as well. So if we say we're going to use $1 million for Bay Street, we don't move those funds out of the Growing Communities Reserve Fund. It sits in there and still has that flexibility. So if we need to change course with a capital project like that, it doesn't prevent us from using it for another water infrastructure project, for example.
Right. Thank you for that clarification. That's very helpful.
Just another point on that too, it's earning really good interest, right?
Yes.
So the longer we can leave it in reserves or wherever reserves Because the better. Later, we take it back in the year, we take it out, the better. So might be able to, 2 air filling stations by the time we use it.
I see Mayor Law,
Sorry, just a follow-up question through the chair. We also had some discussions on the Bay Street water treatment. If that's removed or that would stay in there, and if council's direction is to use that for water treatment upgrades, that still is flexible on how that would look for Bay Street. As I know that's a fairly complex a complex issue down on Bay Street. So would that remain flexible enough to cover, upgrades or planning or, any possible sort of lateral moves with Bay Street?
Through the chair, yes, it would.
so just to recap, we'll bring this conversation back either before we go into the deep dive. So I'll leave that at your discretion when to bring that forward, and then let us move on.
Right. Thank you. Through the chair, let's look at a couple of the other grants while we're still on that. And this is for council's awareness. We're not looking for council direction on this. Staff have gone through all this, but this is for council's awareness. The Ministry of Housing announced some capacity funding. You might recall the province announced a bunch of legislation to expedite housing, bills 44, 46, 47, with the objective to expedite housing. And so they also provided a one-time grant to municipalities, regional districts. It needs to be spent by December 2025. And these funds are meant to help municipalities deal with complying with this legislation. So the cost is fairly wide. Eligible costs are things like incremental staff, project management, data collection, community engagement. It is for one-time costs. It's not eligible for capital costs or routine costs that you're already incurring in your operating budget. But as I said, staff have already gone through all this criteria. This is some of the examples that the province gave, things like updating your housing needs report, your OCP, amending your zoning, those sorts of things. This is what staff have developed that are projects that fit this criteria. So that would be the zoning bylaw update, the mobile population census, DCC charges for sewer and housing, so that would be 2, each for 40. Development approvals update, so that would be a new project that's needed to comply with this new legislation. The amenity contribution bylaw, also a new item. And to the extent that we can, maybe some staff resources for housing initiatives that also would fall within the purview of this. So staff evaluated the criteria, and to the extent that we could, we freed up with an eye to freeing up property taxes, but while still staying within the parameters. So that's for council's information. There was also another, just being fulsome with all of the grants, there was another grant that was provided as well. It's over 3 years. And it's the, I think they called it the Tla-o-qui-aht, the climate action. And the objective here is to help local governments deal with climate impacts, either to reach climate targets or to help build resilience for dealing with future climate impacts. Again, this is for council's awareness. Staff have gone through and evaluated projects that could fall within this funding stream. And there they are there. Streetlights, also dealing with some coastal flooding and tsunami risk, which again is something coming as a result of climate change. And as well, fire hall seismic upgrade, the recommendations for that. Okay. Thought that maybe we'd take a break at this point.
Yeah, well, I see Mayor Law's got his hand raised. Go ahead, Mayor Law.
It's hard to see that.
Yeah, it is.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry. You know what? I'm just going to put my hand up, and if I don't get noticed, I'll make a little squeak or something.
Perfect.
But just to go back to this one here, just from my personal view, that Tofino has a serious lack of EV chargers, and I think and just a point, any talk of mitigating climate or dealing with climate has to include EV infrastructure, and Tofino is sorely lacking that at the moment. So I think that should be soon, as soon as possible, a priority of somewhat. That's my opinion.
Thank you, Mayor Lon. Just maybe a quick follow-up on that. I know you in the Housing Capacity Fund, capital was not inclusive of that. I'm seeing here that LED streetlights, I'm going to make the assumption the local government climate action, that capital type projects would be acceptable under the grant. Great, thank you. Councilor McMaster.
Going back to the housing slide, we said the money could be used for incremental staffing. And I think we know that Kelly Lynn from the Housing Corporation is going to need some admin help. Is there any, some of this be used for that?
Through the chair, if I may answer that one. Later on in the presentation, we'll be speaking to the Housing Accelerator Fund. And I believe that would be the funding we'd be looking to support some of the Tofino Housing Corporation needs. So we didn't look at it through this funding stream, but did look at it through the Housing Accelerator.
Okay.
And maybe a point of clarity on the staffing resources, the incremental cost. If we are looking at any scope changes within existing positions, and the overall cost of that position doesn't change, that does qualify for eligible funding under this. And so when we're looking at the staffing resources for housing initiatives, if we have staff specifically working on that where they normally wouldn't, we can allocate the funds for that.
Well, we.
Question also on that one. The development cost charge, is that to review development cost charges, that cost up there?
Yes, it is.
Thanks. So,
Well, I wonder if maybe we were gonna have a break after this section, but I don't know if people are feeling pretty good. We can just kind of carry on. Yeah, okay, sounds good. Let me get my next batch of notes. Okay, changes from some of the services. That's our group for corporate services. So that plus the CAO's office, plus probably more importantly, overall corporate expenses are all in administration. So when we talk about overall corporate expenses, we're talking about like legal, interest, IT support, those sorts of things. So we've pulled up in bold under the change column some of the bigger changes to speak to council about. The first one being administration revenue. So that's going up, we're anticipating by more than $100,000. And that's purely due to the interest rate environment. Higher interest revenues we're anticipating from our investments and from our bank accounts. Right now, we're receiving 5.3% on our bank account right now. So yeah, prime's pretty high. So that's going to be more revenue coming into the general fund. Staffing, office administration, administrative under expenses. That's primarily training. We had the reorg recently. We have some new staff, but we have closely looked at training to make sure that we're keeping to sort of existing levels on a per person basis. But we do have some people moving around in different areas. And so their training needs to be put in the department where they are. The remainder of the 62,000 for staffing, office administration, about 10,000 of that is legal. There's also salary wage increases and some increases to supply costs as well due to inflation. The last line, information technology, so that increase reflects the new IT contract that we have starting now with Myra.
I just have a quick clarification question, and it's my ignorance. 2020, the second column, 2024 adopted budget.
Yeah.
Maybe you could explain that to me.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you, Councillor Stere. So the first column is 2023 Q4 actuals. At this point, they're not audited, but that's where we land. 2024 adopted budget is our 2024 column of our 2023 to 2026 plan. So that's where we were this last year.
Thank you.
2024 proposed budget is, now that knowing what we know, this is where we see some changes from where we were a year ago in our planning.
Great, thank you.
But yeah, thank you for that clarification, Councillor Stere. Okay, council operating budget. So draft number 2 reflects the changes that council had requested. So we'll just walk through them all. Grant revenues up $10,000, that first line item. That is the council to council meetings. This is providing for a grant stream that we've applied for 2024. So that's providing for that grant stream to come in. And the second item, transfer from reserve, that is the Tofino Rec Commission funds. So the Tofino Rec Commission was wound up and $13,000 of those funds came in. And they've been held for a special council grant. So this is the revenue piece of it, and you're going to see provision in the expenses down below for the costs that are related to these revenues as well.
I have a quick question, and once again, just clarification for me. So with the commission, there's approximately $14,000. I vaguely remember a conversation with council around the allocation of those funds and where we're looking at placing, and correct me if I'm totally out to lunch, there was a number of areas where we were looking at capturing that. And I think the Kids Access Fund was one of those areas. Is that reflected in that, or is that a
through the chair, so I have the resolution here. So 41,000-ish dollars of the Rec Commission general account was going to be allocated to the Kids Access Fund. So that doesn't show up in council's budget, but it will be put into a reserve and used on an annual basis as we need to expend those funds.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Going into the expenses now, council initiatives and advocacy. This was $10,000 added for advocacy initiatives that council wanted to see in their budget, offset by some slight decreases in some other line items in that area. The next item, council grants. Again, this is going to be the $13,000 of Tofino Rec Commission coming in. This also reflects $7,000 for council grants and $7,000 for arts and culture grants. When council discussed on December the 5th that they might want to see a staggered increase of $7,000 in 2024 and $7,000 in 2025 for each of those. So that's what's been made provision for in there. And then under council expenses, this is the other piece that you see from the revenue. That's the council to council grant for $10,000. And then some additional costs for travel, slightly offset by the theater rental not happening this year. Okay, so I'll just maybe pause there, see if there's any questions.
Mayor Law, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Just a note, I think in the package for this, there might be some different numbers in the 2024 adopted budget. Just going to throw that out there. I did, unfortunately, I'm stuck in Victoria, so I don't have my paper budget copy with me. But just a note that I wrote down that it was a slightly different number. So I just want to confirm that these numbers are the correct ones.
Thank you, Mayor Law. Yes, I see that Lisa has nodded that she's acknowledged that, and we'll look into that. Thank you.
Because I don't show up on the video, that's true. Good stuff. Okay, yep, no, we will double check into that for the adopted from 2023, 2024 numbers to now. Okay. Okay, and just to sort of close the loop, there was a lot of discussion at the December 4th council meeting about sort of arts and culture grants, and so we have put those, as you see, in the budget. So this is in draft 2. It's been captured in draft 2. There's as we see when we get into the 3rd section of our presentation, we'll see where we're at in terms of shortfall. And so throughout the piece, staff will be sort of highlighting new items and new additions to budget as a flag for council, because this may be somewhere that council may want to consider, okay, we've got a gap and where do we want to go? And with that shortfall that we need to close, it sometimes is easier to close something that is new or increased rather than cutting existing things that are currently in the budget. So before I hand it over to the other directors for their areas, I just wanted to flag for council. We've got some early budget approvals coming up that you'll hear. So directors will listen for it because directors will give more detail in their areas about these. But I've put a big summary up there for all of them so that council can be alert to it. We're going to follow a slightly different format, I think, than we maybe have in the last few years. We've got 2 parts of this year. So the first part we're seeing today, that's the February 15th, 3 items there. That resolution we'll have for council to consider at the end of the divisional presentations. But council, do stay tuned. We just wanted to flag that there are 2 more that staff have felt are necessary to go better. These early approvals are needed. But we felt that it made sense for council to see the context of the water master plan on February 26th before going through with an early budget approval on those. So there'll be a second resolution at that point. Okay.
I just have a quick question, just for clarity, back on the other slide in terms of council grants. You were talking about in terms of our ability to balance budget and some of the potential areas that we might look to, and just as once we have a closer idea of what we need to balance the budget, so we can revisit something like this, and either because it is somewhat discretionary, you look at things either a complete absence of it or a reduction in what that is. We have presently 7,000 and 7,000, but we could certainly adjust those numbers to reflect a balanced budget, and that's a possibility within this process.
Through the chair, yes, certainly you can look to change the amounts or even just delay them.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, well, I think I will turn it over to
April. Would this be a time to take a 5-minute bio break or 2-minute bio break? Reconvene here, and Ms. Vermont, if you'd like to take over.
Thank you. Dennis, are we good there? Great. Good morning, Mayor and Council. I'm going to be presenting the community services budget. Familiar with the various functions that make up this division. Beginning with the Children's Center, I'm pleased to say we're finally in a good place, not a perfect place, but a very good place with staffing. The best it has been in quite some time. So we do see higher revenues anticipated for this year, as we expect we'll be able to move up to full enrollment of 18 children, as well reopened to the full right till 5 o'clock. So right now we're on a somewhat of a shortened day to be able to work with current staffing constraints. We're currently training 3 staff to take their early childhood education certificate. And so that's going to allow us to be open full time.
I just want to quickly comment. This has been a focus, previous council and stuff, and I can't thank the amount of work that has gone into this particular file and to get to where we are, and the creative thinking that had to go into this project, and the continued work that has gone on to get us back to the intent of what that children's center was centered for. So it's just a quick thank you to all of staff on this particular one. Thank you.
Yeah, I can't speak highly enough about the staff at the center and how flexible and adaptable they have been throughout this challenging time as well.
Operating budget for recreation, we do see an increase in grants and contributions. There's a couple of significant in terms of recreation grants that have been applied for. One is the $25,000 New Horizons Seniors Grant. As well, there is a $50,000 BC Healthy Living Alliance grant. So we're seeing higher grant revenues there than we have in the past. As well as program revenues are increasing. We are seeing more use of the community hall and, with that more drop-in programs as well. We have currently rented 2 nights at the community school for gym access. And so we're seeing drop-in programs there and anticipate higher revenues. We also introduced the facility attendant, which has allowed us to make more use of the community hall. And we're seeing more higher attendance at those drop-in programs at the hall as well. Recreation projects. I'm not going to talk about projects unless council has a particular question where there is no change. So I'll skip right to ones where there has been some change. So recreation strategic plan did not begin in 2023, so that's been moved into 24-25, but no change to the budget for that project. Moving on to planning services, we have significantly here you're seeing in the second line down, that's the Housing Accelerator Fund grant, which we're optimistic that we will receive, but perhaps slightly lower revenue. And I'll talk about that a little bit further along. Staffing does appear higher, and that is a reflection of changes in the organizational structure, which saw the bylaw services function, some of those expenses moving into planning services. And when we get to the bylaw services slides, you'll see that those expenses are down. Projects, there's no change to the planning projects listed here. And where we do see a change is we have identified a new funding source, as Lisa mentioned earlier. The housing capacity funding is able to be used for the zoning bylaw update. We've also increased that budget slightly just due to the growing complexity of that project. Housing Accelerator Fund, you see there, council may know that we applied for roughly 2.6. We understand the program is oversubscribed, and so we've reduced that funding accordingly. Again, still not confirmed that we'll receive that, but we are feeling optimistic. Mobile population census, that is a 3-year project, so 15,000 every second year. That actually the 2024 data has already been received. Staff received that funding, received that data in January and is reviewing that. That is also being now funded. Two years of that, I believe, or sorry, 1 year of that is being funded with the Ministry of Housing capacity funding. And I think I just talked about all of this, but so here it is in more detail. So Ministry of Housing capacity funding is funding 70% of the zoning bylaw update, with the balance coming from the reserve, the zoning bylaw review reserve. Housing Accelerator Fund, so roughly 1.5 is more what we're expecting if we are to be successful. And mobile population census, so one of the 3 years where we would do that work would be funded through the capacity funding. And that's a function of the Ministry of Housing capacity funding must be fully expended by the end of 2025. So only the 2024 year would be eligible.
Just a quick question. In terms of the mobile population census work and our housing needs assessment work that is required, do those two fit in closely in terms of our?
Yeah, that will inform. Yeah, exactly. Those numbers will, that data will inform our other planning. Dark skies policy. This is a new project that council hasn't seen before. In a previous budget meeting, the district has a dark sky policy. It was written in 2010. It does provide a provision for the policy to be reviewed annually. To my knowledge, it has not ever been reviewed. There is language in the OCP that supports the continuation of the dark skies policy, and it would help staff tremendously to be able to update and refine that, as staff do refer to that when issuing development permits, and it is quite out of date. There are a number of better resources out there now.
And just another quick question. When we look at a budget request of 5,000 for a policy, dark skies policy, what is that a consultant fee? Where does that 5,000 come from?
Thank you for the question. This work would be done in-house. Staff would do this work in-house, and the 5,000 is for legal review. Right. Moving on to building inspection. Somehow I'm out of sync here with my slides. I think something's been deleted, so here we go. So building inspection is primarily funded by fees, collected permit fees. It is difficult to predict year to year what revenue will be. We have reduced 2024's proposed budget based on 2023 actuals. So you'll see that reflected there. Operating budget for emergency planning. This area, while it's primarily funded by taxation, we do see a number of grants coming in 2024 for this. The district has received a Next Generation 911 grant. We have applied for 2 community emergency preparedness funds, or about to apply for one of those community emergency preparedness funds through UBCM. And there is also a EMCR EMCR Indigenous Engagement grant that the district has received to look at some of the changes in the Emergency Program Act. And so those are all reflected there in the revenues. Emergency planning project summary, so no change to those first 4. What we do see changed is just simply the funding sources of 2 2025 projects, being the coastal flooding tsunami inundation review, tsunami risk mitigation review, and those are 2 of the projects that we would fund with the local government climate action. Again, I think I've just spoken to those, so no change to the projects themselves, but now these are able to be funded instead of with taxation through this grant funding. Moving on to bylaw services. Again, due to changes in the organizational structure now being reflected in the 2024 budget, we do see the staffing costs here go down somewhat due to some of those costs moving into the planning services budget. And this is funded through primarily through a mix of licenses and permit fees and taxation. RMI, we're all familiar. Operating budget to RMI, this budget changes somewhat based on how we apply the project management fees for staff that support these projects. And so again, due to changes in the organizational structure, we are seeing an amount coming from taxation. There, the 51,814. Project summary, no change to these projects that were proposed earlier. First Street Dock sidewalk access, Cox Bay accessible ramp, and South Tonkin Trail upgrades. We have pushed out, once again, Campbell Street Phase 3 to 2025, just due to not having all of the funds required to complete that project. And what has been changed and updated, and I'll talk about that in the next slide, is the multi-use path upgrades. So initially approved in the 5-year plan, we've sort of been working our way south with the multi-use path upgrades, was 670,000 fully funded by RMI to complete section of pathway south of Jensens Bay, sort of the first half of that section between Jensens Bay Road and the Visitor Information Center. That section, while it does not currently meet the 4-meter standard, it is otherwise in fairly reasonable shape. And so staff are recommending that instead of that, we focus on the Dolphin Motel section, if you will, as well as 100 lineal meters just south of the visitor center between the start of the MUP extension and the fourth path that are also in need of upgrades. Initially, staff had an initial cost estimate of 265,000 that was presented at the last budget meeting. We've since refined those cost estimates, and that is now 360,000, although much less than the 670,000 that we had previously approved for 2024.
And just a quick question, that $100,000 increase, so what was the why? I know it's a complex section and it's absolutely the priority. I think that's well identified. What was the increase in there? I'm just out of curiosity.
Yeah, as we move into a more detailed design, surveys and things like that, things are identified on site that do put up those costs. This is an engineered cost estimate, and our contracted engineer, Makalini, they do compare with more recent contract prices that they are seeing in the area as well. And so that can often change what a cost estimate may come in at.
Thank you. And
I had a question. I'm not sure if you'll have this information, but do you know what time in 2024 there the project that's made to begin?
So this project, there's a note at the top requesting early budget approval for this project, and that is to take advantage of the spring construction window. But we do find that projects done in the fall sometimes run out of room with asphalt in the season. And so scheduling these projects in the spring wherever possible leaves us a bit more room to get that completed within the year.
Nice, that's great news. I'm also thinking about last year with the mock construction and the water use required and the fact that we're probably going into a higher drought year. So it's a good timeline for that.
School ball field upgrades. So I think council is aware that staff have been working with the school district and the administration on a potential partnership that would see upgrades to the school ball fields. This would be the replacement of 2 ball diamonds and associated site works. This is somewhat brought on by the construction of the Children's Center on SD 70 property, which impacts one of the existing diamonds. The work would include soccer fields as well, two soccer fields. We are somewhat constrained by the site, and I do have a photo or a sketch, if you will, in the next slide. And this would be in partnership with School District 70. They have indicated that they would be willing to come to the table with both some amount of cash and also in-kind contributions towards this project, whether that be removals of existing diamonds and so forth. The engineered cost estimate puts the construction cost at $505,000, but with soft costs, engineering contingency, that sort of thing, we're looking at a total budget of about $695,000. I will put the picture up. Yes.
Yes,
If we put this money into this, what about ongoing upkeep, groundskeeping?
So those are,
Responsibility is that?
thank you, through the chair. Staff are having those conversations with SD 70 now. What does that look like? This is a significant amount that the community may be investing in this project. So what kind of assurance do we have on long-term use? And so those conversations are somewhat connected to other more general school District of Tofino use conversations as well. So sort of only so much I can say about it at this point. I have a small, I know it's not super easy to see up there. Just to orient everyone, the school building itself is at the top of the photo. The new children's center that is under construction is shown at the far right. And the diamonds would be reoriented to not be hitting balls towards the facility or the daycare. So that's why you see that orientation. We are somewhat constrained by the site. There is a large ravine at the back of the ball field that would be, cost prohibitive to, construct a retaining wall or something like that. There is also some rock removal on the southwest portion of that site that would be required in order to construct something of this nature.
You'll find a whole bunch of baseballs if you go back in the back part where the ravine is. This is super exciting. I think, I don't know when we'll bring that conversation up at some point here, but now that there's a number and a picture, I think this, in terms of where I'd like to allocate some of those funds, has really changed my view. This is wonderful.
Any other questions from council before I move on? Moving on to the fire department. No significant changes here, just a slight drop in staffing, office and admin expenses. And again, that's just related to changes in the organizational structure that we saw reflected in the 2024 budget that were changes from 2023. No change to those projects previously approved, including the air filling station, aside from the potential new funding source. We were unsuccessful with the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund grant for tool replacement, so we will not be moving forward with that work because we did not receive that funding. Fire hall seismic upgrades. This is it's a new project. We have had path condition assessments on the fire hall both in 2018 and 2021 that indicate that building would not be in good shape in a post-disaster situation. And as the fire department is our primary emergency response agency, and we want to take a look at the building and see if there are things that could be done to bring it up to a higher standard where we would feel more confident in being able to get those trucks out in the event of emergency. So this is engineering work. It's not any upgrade to the building, but to develop a set of recommendations and cost estimates for what may be able to be done there, and so that we can more accurately consider what we might need to invest in.
Yeah, and just a quick question. In part of the seismic upgrades, I'm probably going to answer my own question. I know a couple of years ago we had applied for unsuccessful in creating a new facility for the fire hall. Not available anymore. I'm just wondering, within that seismic upgrade, might there be recommendations that the costs of those seismic upgrades may exceed what the building of a new, would that be part of that upgrade conversation?
Yes, definitely. And I think we're trying to just define that a little bit better so we can make some more informed decisions around it.
Great, thank you.
And with that, I'll pass it over to the Director of Infrastructure and Public Works.
Morning, Mayor and Council. I'm going to attempt to move through this presentation both quickly but with lots of information so we can have time for the Alberni-Clayoquot District to provide us with their presentation. So I think we're all familiar with the various departments in the division. And so I'm going to get right into the presentation. So today I'll be talking about public works, water, sewer, the projects, and then any changes to those projects. I'm happy to take questions throughout it. We've divided up these slides between revenues and expenses. So you're going to see a slide of revenues, and then you're going to see a slide of expenses because there are so many. And I'm going to focus today primarily on items that are at least $20,000, so fairly material changes that council may want to understand further. And the last thing I want to say before I get started is that is what we're going to see sort of overall in this budget is something I want to call, which Ms. Vermont may laugh at, but what I call maintenance with intent. So we have an asset management program now, and we have a utilities team that are working very closely together. And as we start to develop those plans and really understand our infrastructure, we're going to see costs associated with those throughout the department. So I just wanted to maybe just say that as an overall point. So getting into it, on this slide, I'd like to draw your attention to the facilities and structures. We see an increase from the proposed or the adopted budget, $20,000. That's related to increased community hall fees due to the increased use of the community hall. In expenses, we see increases at the Public Works building. That's primarily related to a roof repair that didn't get done in 2023, as well as some outstanding electrical work. For streets and sidewalks, we see that increase there of $38,270. It's primarily related to tree maintenance, increasing that budget, asphalt patching, winter maintenance, and repair of a number of streetlights. And again, just to circle back to my initial comments, these are items that we're starting to pick up through our ongoing maintenance program of areas of our infrastructure that have been neglected for a number of years. Moving down the table to facilities and structures, we see increases at cemetery, community hall, which is primarily related to an electrical audit, a waterfront capital plan, and ongoing alarm monitoring. And then in parks and trails, we actually see a decrease, that's primarily related to we moved out a portion of the parks and strategic plan. So that's why we're seeing a reduction there.
I think, and just Aaron, I'm just curious on the drainage as an example, where it's not a huge amount, but it's significantly reduced in terms of, and I love that quote, maintenance with intent. On drainage specifically, is there a reason why that one has decreased?
I don't have the notes there for that, Councillor Stere, but I'd have to dig into that, but I can ask, take a note.
Yeah, no, that's.
What we did, I would say between December 5th meeting and this meeting was I went back to our staff of Public Works and our Infrastructure and Public Works, And we really went through the budget, and so we reduced budget significantly in some areas. And I'll hang my hat on that for now, but maybe get back to council with a answer this afternoon.
Thank you.
So in terms of our public works projects, a number of these aren't changing, so I'll let council review these items, but I'm not going to speak to any of them unless I have any questions. Councilor Sore.
I just had a curious question about the LED streetlight replacement, because I know there had been some communication with Public Works about brightness or the direction on some houses when they first came in. Are we using the warmer toned LEDs now?
We're using thank you, Councillor. Sorry for your question, and through the chair. We're using the warmest that we can within the range that were provided to us. The issue, I believe, with those lights, and it's something we haven't addressed yet, is the shielding of it.
Okay.
So right now, where the models don't give you any shielding, and so that light's going everywhere. And so this project is primarily just focused on replacing our current halogen lights with LED lights for the energy saving, the climate benefits. But we haven't gone down the road yet of redesigning the LED streetlights. Of all our streetlights, actually.
Maybe that'll be something that comes with the dark skies review.
Likely, yeah. So what's happening in asset management is we don't have standards for lights right now. So up until now, we've accepted what developers have given us, and we're in the process of fixing what we have. So we have exposed wires and and non-efficient lights, but we haven't really got into what would be the perfect model for us. So I think maybe that's a really good point, that connecting with Ms. Vermont about the dark sky policy and what that might look like, because I do have some emails in my inbox about those lights shining to people's bedrooms, including my own household. So
yeah, just emailing your own email.
But not me. Someone else in my household emailing Public Works.
Okay, the chair has asked me to step in for a moment in his absence, and I see Mayor Law has a question.
Thank you, Chair. Just a comment on just to follow up with Councillor Sawyer, that perhaps the dark sky policy could precede streetlight replacement in case it may impact it. That would be my own thing. I'd love to see the streetlights replaced with shielding and warmer tones, but that was my only comment. Or removed altogether.
Anyone else want to weigh in on streetlights?
I'd agree that if there's a chance, having to provide building for the lights will mean that we will have to replace or redesign them again. And therefore, spending money twice on the LED replacements, maybe it would be smart to do the policy review first.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Anderson, for taking over. Mayor Law.
Thank you, Chair. I just have to step out of the meeting for 2 minutes for a critical call.
Roger, copy.
Thank you. We have two projects here that don't have any changes, but are part of the early budget approval list. One is the community hall floor and roof replacement, and the 4th Street upgrades. Deferred or deleted projects include the drainage master plan, which was removed basically due to a lack of both financial and human resources at this time. This project will come back to council in the coming years once our task lists are a little bit shorter, and we've ensured that we have the funding to undertake that. The Olson Road storm main has been deferred to 2025 as we continue conversations with Modi about a contribution from that organization. And then in terms of the changed items, we've reduced the budget for the subdivision and development bylaw update, and in the development cost charge bylaw technical updates, we're proposing new funding sources, as well as moving a couple of projects up to take advantage that funding. So in terms of the 4th Street upgrades, the changes to this project, what we see, I would see a number of changes. One being an increase to the budget of about $100,000 related to more detailed design drawings. The original drawings for this project for the water main specifically were developed 2 or 3 years ago, and so the proposed budget increase is basically just a reflection of where construction costs have gone. The funding source is proposed to be from CNI levy and decency roads. It's going to be a project that replaces asbestos concrete water main from Gibson Street along 4th to Campbell Street. We're also going to look at the drainage of that section at the same time and install some sort of pedestrian pathway, likely a sidewalk that connects Campbell Street to Gibson Street by a sidewalk. That would likely happen on the Gibson Garden side of the road. The other piece of this was not really a change, but maybe a bit of an addition, and I'll get into a little bit later, will be would be tendering a project that actually includes the portion of Gibson Street water main that needs replacement. That can be fully funded from development cost charges, so that the idea will be to combine those two projects through the tender process. That would be a new project for council, so it's not necessarily part of this, but it's going to be adjacent to it, but likely the same contractor working on it.
And in the same time frame.
Same time frame. Yeah. We identified it as looking at the water master plan as an opportunity to replace some water infrastructure in the same area, funded fully from development cost charges. It seemed like a win-win situation. So, but because it's a new project, we're not looking for early approval for that. We would likely tender this project with that being an optional project. Somebody so a tenderer could make a bid on that. The community hall floor and roof replacement. This is a project we'd like to get moving on sooner rather than later and hold some quotes that we have. It's intended to replace the community hall roof and fully replace the floor. Originally, we thought last year we could do some repairs and get a little bit extra life out of it, but upon further review, have decided that it makes more sense to do full replacements. This will increase the lifespan of that building, and it is our only real community space, indoor community space.
And just a quick, in terms of disruption to the community hall timeframes, as you know, I just think of revenues and of course community access to the hall. What would be the rough, if there is a rough estimate of what that lack of access would be?
Yeah, thanks, Councilor Stere, for your question. It's a great question. In terms of the floor, it's only going to be a couple of days. It's fairly, we're in and we're out. So maybe at most we're closed for 5 days, but what we understand is going to be shorter than that. So it's basically time to pull that old floor out and then put the new floor down. And we can, work with our contractors to work around any programming issues. As we move into the summertime as well, we have the opportunity to be outside. In terms of the roof, we think we can achieve the roof with very little disruption. Again, just based on timing, safety. These things do go quite quickly, depending on which side the contractors are working from and what's happening, which, we can move accesses to the hall from either side if we need to. So I think there will be minimal disruption for activities there.
Right, thanks. Councilor Swan.
While you're looking at this project, has there been any thought put into like adding rain catchment or?
There has not.
About like maybe assessing it for adding solar capacity at all?
We have nothing that year. I'm just trying to think when we were looking at. I have to think about when we were designing the indoor recreation facility. We looked at solar for that building, I believe, as one of our as one of the options to ensure that it met the climate criteria that the federal government had put in front of us. But we haven't actually looked at solar on this building that I'm aware of. these are the details. I believe at our last meeting, council had some questions about pricing, so we went back to our vendors and we're happy with the prices that are being provided. Basically, it's fairly simple. We're gonna take shingles off and put shingles back on, remove a vinyl floor, put it on the vinyl floor. It's fairly simple. And again, following that meeting with council, we vetted these numbers again. The development cost charge bylaw technical updates. This is a project that will span the length of the 5-year financial plan and will be ongoing after that. The intent is to remove each of the infrastructure classes out of our current development cost charge bylaw and create separate bylaws for each of those classes. The intent behind that is to make sure that we can review one bylaw per year so that everything is being updated on a 5-year basis. That's important for development cost charges bylaws because they basically, what they do is they say, here are the projects that are related to growth. And you choose your projects, and here's how much they're going to cost. And those numbers go into the bylaw. So if you're not updating your bylaw, as we haven't for 20 years, we're having costs from 2008 for projects that we have to build in 2024. So we want to make sure that those are at least reviewed on a 5-year basis to update those projects if we complete your projects and update any funding. In terms of the funding source, we're proposing to fund at this point from 40% from the housing capacity funding, 40% from taxation, and 20% from C&I roads levy. If you get granular on this financial plan, the housing capacity funding will take care of the housing DCCs in 24, the sewer DCCs in 24, as well as us completing our water DCC, which we began last year. And then as we move through the remaining years in the financial plan, we'll look for other options for funding other than taxation. But for 2024, we're looking at completing 3 of these bylaws. Taking care of these first 3 together will also lead to some efficiencies in terms of contracting, writing the actual bylaw. The technical stuff will be different, but the front side of the bylaw will likely be very similar. And so we think we can get some efficiencies there and lean a little bit more heavily on that housing capacity funding that we're suggesting to be funded from. And
just welcome our guest from the ACRD here. That was a good opportunity. I saw the DCC bylaw technical review. I thought that might be of interest. So perfect timing. So welcome here.
I'm going to keep going or pause.
Yeah, let's keep going for about 10 more minutes until 5:02, and then we'll maybe take a 5-minute break to transition.
Okay. And I'll just get as far as I can get in 10 minutes.
Sure.
So we're going to move on now to the water fund. This is the revenue side of the water fund. So what we see actually in 2024 in the proposed budget is reduction in water charges. And the reason we see that is that our water charges are set based on what we received in the previous year. And last year we had the road closure as well as significant water conservation activities. So we're basing the 24 budget on those numbers, which is why we're seeing a decrease in estimated funds for 2024. And that's all I have to say about revenues. They're going down. In terms of expenses, we see a significant cost.
Just if I could interrupt, Mayor Law has his hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair, Mr. Rose, are we not looking at? Sorry, maybe I missed it here, but we're looking at reviewing the water charges to perhaps increase them in the summer months. Sorry.
Thank you for the question, Mayor Law. I think I'm going to defer that to the CEO to describe if we can. I do understand, but I feel like you'd give it a more fulsome answer.
Yes, so we are in the process of reviewing utility rates, and we previously thought we would be able to introduce new rates for Q2, but just given limited time to be able to turn that around to council, we're looking at a Q3 new rates introduced for Q3 of 2024. So rate scenarios will be coming forward at a committee of the whole, but it's moved out. It's moved out one quarter.
Okay, moving back to expenses. We see significant increases in costs in staffing, office, and administrative. These are related to ongoing condition assessments based through our asset management program. A little bit of extra training just due to the fact we have a number of new employees. Some of this is related to bill adjustments that occur at the end of the year, the cost of the subdivision bylaw. But the large driver here is actually the water source feasibility project, which will be introduced to council as a project at the February 26th meeting. And that's a significant portion of that. I think it's up top of my head, $105,000 and change. And this is why we're seeing a significant increase there. So the next two items I'll address together because the increases are related. In terms of our reservoirs and our water treatment, we're seeing increases due to our asset management program, but these increases are primarily related to upgrading the safety at those two areas. So we're installing railings, new coatings, and ladders that don't currently exist, and these are for fall protection. So as we go through an asset management program is about taking care of our resources, our most important resource, which is driven into me by our asset management point all the time, is our human resources. And currently we're operating facilities without the proper safety equipment. So the drivers for those two programs are directly related to safety, as well as a little bit of repair and maintenance, including some new coatings on tanks. In terms of the water projects, we're seeing an increase here. This is directly related to increasing the budget in our conservation program, which I will discuss later in this meeting, and is derived from our water conservation plan and our water master plan that will be introduced to council on the 26th of February. And finally, in water lines, again, another significant increase directly related to asset management. These are for those funds will be allocated to the repair and maintenance of our fire hydrants. So our fire hydrants require a 3-year service called a B service. We haven't been conducting that for, I don't know, a number of years, or if we have, it's been haphazard. We have 130 odd fire hydrants. We've developed a program to repair those or to maintain those hydrants at a rate of 43 per year. So the next 3 years, we will get through the service and then back again. So this is a cost that's new because it's a program that we have to follow, and it will be there ongoing as we work on 43 hydrants a year for Affinity. The funds also include replacement of 2 hydrants. We have there's under 10, I think it's 7 hydrants that need full replacement that haven't been maintained well. Hydrants should last you 50 to 100 years. And so we're going to be replacing a couple of hydrants a year until we get to the point where all our hydrants are functioning in the manner in which they should. For council's interest in a little bit more detail, a B service means our staff going out on site and working on a hydrant, probably 2 people for 2 to 3 hours, tearing that hydrant apart, going through a systematic check, replacing the broken pieces, and then putting it back together. And so at 43 hydrants, we'll be doing a hydrant a week-ish. Maybe we can do a couple more. So again, this is just one of those things that we haven't, or items that we haven't addressed as a municipality that we're going to begin to address. So that's a large driver there in the water lines is the fire hydrants. Any
on that, are you prioritizing more populated areas with those?
It's a great question. It's an open question. The asset management team and utility team are currently working out whether they should go off of condition, location in the community, should we do this area, or as needed basis. So I don't know the answer to it yet. I do know that I will probably give you that answer by the time we have this next budget meeting. Okay, in terms of project summary for the water fund, there are no changes to those first 3 items. We've deleted the SCADA integration program. We actually had 2 SCADA programs to upgrade our current SCADA, some of our SCADA system, plus upgrade some lift stations with SCADA. But working with the the manager of infrastructure and capital projects, we believe that a lot of that can be built onto the back of the wastewater treatment plant project. So we've removed one of the spade integration projects. We still will be going forward with the other one, but we think we've found a way to potentially save some funds from our reserves there. In terms of the changed or updated programs, the Bay Street water treatment upgrades have been deferred a year. So funding slightly changed, subject to council consideration, and then the water conservation programs have been increased significantly. So in terms of the Bay Street water upgrade, I think we've spoken about the complications about this project, about where this project is, the state of the current building, what our future water source might be. And so in order to give us some time to make some of those, to get the data to make that decision, we've pushed this project out to 2025. And going back to the conversation we had earlier today, we've allocated 39% of the funds from the Growing Communities funds, a grant to be determined portion, and then the C&I levy at 27%.
And just to be clear for council, we will be having that conversation around the Growing Communities Fund contribution to this particular project and potentially the amount allocated, which will change that percentage on the allocation, I suspect.
Exactly. So when we were at last council meeting, we were originally funding 7-8% of this from the Growing Communities Fund as a placeholder in a sense, and then based on information that we heard from council, we reduced that for this presentation. And then I understand this is part of that slide that we need to go back and talk to. The water conservation program is significantly increased. With some of the findings in the water master plan, we're going to need to get better at water conservation, and we're going to need to put some funding into that water conservation program. The budget request is over the 5 years. It is proposed to be funded from contributions at 62% and water charges at 38%. This program at this point is primarily the development or the continuation of the water audits that we've been doing over a number of years, but basically formalizing that and ensuring it happens on a yearly basis. And then a potential in 2025 of starting some sort of program where we can provide storage to the community at a free or reduced rate under some future program, but that has not been developed at this point.
And just a quick question on if you could clarify contributions as a segment. What is contributions in this particular case?
Contributions, well, it means contributions. We are going to be working with our partners in the district and in the commercial sector to develop a program that may be partially funded to the businesses. We haven't yet had those discussions. I'm going to introduce a couple of new projects that we'll be looking for early budget approval at the February 26th meeting. One is remote monitoring and telemetry upgrades on Mears Island. This project actually came to council a year ago or the year before, but we took it back and rescoped it and are proposing to move forward with this. It is identified in the water master plan as something we need to do. And the idea behind it is to allow us to monitor our streams on an hourly or daily basis ongoing remotely so that we can start to fine tune our water plan. So we right now rely on looking at cameras in the dams to see where everything is, but we don't actually know the water coming into that. And what we really do need to know that, and that will give us the best opportunity we have to squeeze as much water as we can out of the current system while we figure out what our next best idea will be in terms of finding another source of water. Related to that is finding another source of water. So this is again a study that is mentioned. So the alternative water source feasibility study is spoken about in the water master plan. It includes in the water master plan a brief idea of what these projects may be. This project is going deep into developing a cost estimate for each of those ideas, whether it makes sense for us as a community, what other levels of government may need to be involved. So it's going to be a fairly detailed plan that'll hopefully come out with 5 to 8 new water source feasibilities, and we'll bring that back to council and the community for a discussion about which of those makes the most sense for us to pursue if we want to pursue any.
Just, once again, I'm very much looking forward to that master plan coming forward. So it puts all of this into context. So wonderful news, but to see the overall big picture will help to fit these pieces into that conversations. Very much look forward to that.
Yeah, and for anybody who's listening out there in internet land, February 26th, we'll be presenting the water master plan and the water conservation plan. It's must watch TV.
Erin, I think we're gonna pause there
Thank you.
and we can pass to 5 minutes. Please.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Well, we'll reconvene here and thank you for coming. It was a long day yesterday and I appreciated the work yesterday. So ACRD, as you may know, there's a number of shared services in our region. In particular, I think Tara's going to go over in a little bit of detail what is directly related to the West Coast here, specifically Tofino. And I appreciate you guys coming out here from Port Alberni. It is a beautiful day, so great. So I'll leave it there and thank you guys for coming.
Perfect. Okay, so we have a few on Zoom as well. Is that? Yes, okay, perfect. So, oh, there we go. Now I can see him in the corner there. So I'm Terry Fong. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the Regional District. And today I brought Alex Dyer. He's our planning manager with us. And we'll just run through the Tofino kind of components of the Regional District Financial Plan. So I'll give you an overview of our financial planning process. With the Regional District, we have a newly adopted 2024 to 2027 strategic plan. Go through the different components of the plan and then tell you where we're at in our process. So in a Regional District model, we have to adopt a financial plan by March 31st of each year for a 5-year period. And each service is independent. So we have to then define proposed expenditures, revenues, and transfers to and from the reserve account. So a little bit different than a municipality in that I cannot transfer services from recreation to water. The areas are only charged for the services that are provided. So I kind of have 59 budgets, not one budget. The allocation of expenditures includes staff time and benefits. And like a municipality, we cannot run a deficit budget. So to develop our financial plan, we look at the operational costs of our existing services. And then we have taken the new strategic plan to try to figure out how we're going to implement that. We have our asset management plans for each of our services. And then this year we started proposed initiative cases, or PICs we call them. They're basically a business case to kind of talk to the board about new initiatives before we fully incorporate them into the financial plan. So that was a new step for us that I think from a staff perspective we quite liked. And there was quite a few that they decided to defer into future years from a financial standpoint. And obviously the goal is to adopt a plan that has the allocation of resources that will achieve the board's outcome, but also be a little bit flexible for the changing social, environmental, and financial context that always changes during the year. So we have public consultation in the form of all of our board and committee meetings are recorded and live streamed to YouTube. We have a budget at acrd.bc.ca email that questions and comments can be submitted to. We do community presentations such as presenting to council like yourself, as well as we have some community associations that in Banfield say that we go to present to. And then we'll also have a formal open house in the Alberni Valley at the Cherry Creek Community Hall on Sunday, March 3rd from 2 till 5 with a presentation at 3:30. We have a very vast area, so public engagement is a little bit tricky because there's so many different people who are only interested in components of the plan. So we try our best to get around and present to those who are interested. So our strategic plan from 2024-2027 has 4 different focus areas. I won't go through all of the details. I can email the slides after if you guys are interested. The plan is just getting the final glossiness added to it and will actually be loaded to our website. But planning for a resilient and livable region with its strategies, including enhanced indoor-outdoor recreation facilities, sustainable land use planning and growth management, viable and responsive transportation services, supporting our volunteers and leveraging grants are the kind of the focuses of that main area. Partnerships and communications, so First Nation protocol agreements, regional governance alignment, and optimizing communication platforms. Oops, I must have missed one. Oh, I must have deleted number 2 yesterday. Number 2 is managing our assets and our infrastructure. So making sure that we're following those asset management plans, trying to close those infrastructure gaps, and making sure that we are not prioritizing shiny and new over our existing infrastructure, or at least doing it with our eyes wide open. And the 4th area is advocacy and service. So really a major part of a regional district board is to be a strong voice for the region and being strategically lobbying for different things, whether that's health services, water, alternative routes for emergencies, all those great, wonderful things that aren't really service driven and we don't really have a role in, but we can be a voice. So our budget is about 29.4 million. It's actually very similar to that of the prior year. Our tax requisition is approximately 11 million, and that includes the hospital district. So we talk about the hospital district and the regional district kind of together. They're 2 separate legal entities, but because the boundaries of both are the same, we just talk about them at the same time. So the increase in taxes is approximately $1 million or 9.83%. A good chunk of that is related to the West Coast Transit Service. So of that $1,531,000 is related to the West Coast Transit Service, which I do have a slide and we'll talk about later. And we anticipate about $7 million worth of grant funding in 2024 for both operational and infrastructure projects. One thing that's always interesting is that even if we change nothing from the prior year budget, the areas between the amounts per area will change because of the change in assessed values and how those relate to the other partners. So this changes every year, but this graph tells me that if I requisitioned the exact same dollar for the exact same service last year, District of Tofino would pay 2.21% more than they did in the prior year. So yeah, the areas don't all increase at the same time. It's very interesting to watch what assessed values have done over the last 10 years in the different areas and the fluctuations. So I'm going to hand it to Alex to talk about the planning part, and then I'll circle back on the rest of it.
Okay, yes, happy to chat regional planning and rural planning. Once I get through it all, I think we'll pause for questions, but if you have anything, feel free to interrupt me as we go along. So the regional planning service includes participation from all of our directors. So that's the 6 electoral area directors, the former North First Nations, and then the Tofino, Q&amp, and Port Alberni representatives we have on the board. A function of the regional planning service is the review of referral applications that we get from the province for new development that's regulated by provincial agencies. Application referrals are reviewed and for compliance with the ACRD's zoning bylaw and the 6 official community plans that we have, and any other servicing or legislative requirements. The most active referrals that we do receive are from the Ministry of Transportation for subdivision. We're not the approving officer for subdivision in the rural areas. We rely on MODI for that. So we received 19 subdivision applications in 2023, which remains higher than average and reflective of the increase in the rezoning and subdivision sides that we've seen over the last 3 years in the electoral areas. Additional referrals that we do get, that you can see on the slide there, include the Agricultural Land Commission, which can include subdivision within the ALR, non-farm uses, non-adhering residential uses in the ALR, and soil deposit. There is no ALR here on the West Coast, so less impact on the coast versus the Alberni Valley. Crown licenses of occupation for uses of Crown land or uses of Crown forest. So, for example, we've had lots of aquaculture referrals in the past in Clayoquot Sound and Barkley Sound as well. We get liquor licensing cannabis production, cannabis retail licensing, applications from the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch. I'm sure you're well familiar with that, with everything out here in Tofino. Mining and quarrying licenses from the Ministry of Mines, water licensing under the Water Sustainability Act, and local government referrals from our community partners. And we actually looked at an OCP amendment that the District of Tofino was looking at recently, and that was referred to our board. So we had looked at it and deemed that our interests were unaffected and responded as such. But that's an example of how we interact with the community out here. So the other function of regional planning encompasses our agriculture, food security, water sustainability, and climate related initiatives. These are led by the regional district. These initiatives are all heavily supported by grant funding, mostly from the province. In 2023, the department hired a sustainability planner as well, which guides all of this work for us. A big component is the agricultural support services throughout the region, which is a program that this service had managed for many years now. That work is guided by the Agricultural Development Committee, as you can see, and the Coastal Agricultural Roundtable, which is a group that I think your membership sits on out here. So the project focus in 2024 includes grant-funded projects to investigate agricultural water supply and distribution options in the Alberni Valley. The final year of our 3-year regional agricultural support system change project, which is a broader expansion of the regional agricultural support system throughout the province and investigating best models for that. And a lot of that has been involvement with the Tofino Community Food Initiative and the Tla-o-qui-aht First Trust as well. The partnership on a meat processing program in the Alberni Valley, and that's partnership with North Allen College. We did that last year, and that was a very successful program, so we're looking forward to do that again. And then also beginning work on developing a corporate climate action plan in the ACRD, which will build upon the greenhouse gas emission tracking that was completed in 2023 for the facilities and the services that the ACRD provides. And then also building on we're currently working on an electric vehicle charging station feasibility study for our facilities as well. So as I mentioned, all these projects are heavily supported by grant funding, and in many cases, 100% grant funding. The regional planning service really has the flexibility to tackle emerging opportunities and challenges like this, and leveraging grant funding in collaboration with our community partners, which really lends to the success of the program, I think. Do we have any questions on regional planning at all?
Maybe I'll just for the board's, or the council's information. So one of the areas that Tofino contributes to from regional planning, there are contributions, and allows us to have a say and a vote on. Maybe if you could explain to council what that looks like, and I believe Tofino is the only municipality that does contribute in that way.
Yeah, we're gonna. I'll get into that right now, actually, if I can.
Okay.
So so when we look at rural planning service, so this is the Part 14 applications that we have under the Local Government Act, things like our rezoning applications, our OCP amendments, the temporary use permits, development variances, development permits, and board of variance. So these are the development applications that we manage in the 6 electoral areas. And what Councillor Stere is mentioning, as you can see on the slide here, the District of Tofino contributes $7,000 per year into this service, and that's to be a voting member on these types of applications at the board table for anything that's within the Clayoquot biosphere area. So really any development that happens in Clayoquot Sound, Director Stere, who's the current representative on the board, would have a vote on that, along with the 6 electoral area directors. So recent examples where that has been used include the Clayoquot Wilderness Resort had some expansion in the last few years. They built some staff housing, and they renovated the buildings and had to rezone the property to do so. That would be an example where Tofino would have a vote in that, along with the 6 electoral area directors. The Cedar Coast Field Station on Vargas Island would be another example. But also broadly, it applies to any zoning that would apply to Tla-o-qui-aht Sound. So when we look at larger text amendments that introduce new uses or new regulations in the entire zoning bylaw, where those apply to lands that are in Tla-o-qui-aht Sound, Tofino would have a vote on that as well. So examples being the cannabis production regulations that we brought in a number of years ago now, the updates for housing legislation. So as we look at allowing secondary suites on residential focused lands and zones, Tofino would have a vote on that if any of those zones apply to Tla-o-qui-aht Sound. So it is a unique aspect, I think. None of the other municipalities or First Nations pay for that ability to do that. There's been a lot of discussion over the years, and like the city of Port Alberni having a say in the rural areas in the Alberni Valley, for example, would be an opportunity as well. But I think that's rather unique. So what this slide shows is hopefully that answered your question.
I think, just for clarification.
No, yeah.
Council to understand how we participate in this.
Yeah, no, happy to.
Because it will come up in further in our budget process.
For sure. So happy to expand on that further. The rest of the slide just shows basically how busy we are. We in 2023, we did receive 63 of these types of applications. This has resulted, we do have 6 different advisory planning commissions. So, the APC meetings and the public hearings that were associated with these types of applications were 42 different evening meetings in the year, which is a heavy workload for us and really higher than average number of rezoning applications, for example, compared with previous years, and a primary focus of those rezoning applications being on housing development and development of new residential and rural lots for housing. We anticipate that the legislative updates that have come down the line to streamline rezonings for proposals that are consistent with the OCPs, may result in less public hearings, but will also result in an increased number of rezoning applications that we expect to see. Based on the current subdivision and rezoning applications that are underway or awaiting our review, we have about 185 potential new lots that are at the application stage. So we're continuing to work our way through those. I think I'll just circle back. I did skip a slide there for there's the project work that we're involved in. So I touched on the zoning bylaw updates that we had been working on. We do have a 1973 zoning bylaw still, and we are looking at ways to update that. And the zoning bylaw review project was the main focus of the project work for the service over the last year. This work led into more public engagement and more discussion around the need to update the OCPs. We do have 6 OCPs throughout the region as well. So in the fall, community planning engagement events were held in each of the areas, including out in Q&amp for the South Long Beach area, where we held open houses and facilitated workshops within the community to discuss things like community visioning and taking advantage of these new opportunities. The South Long Beach OCP was last updated in 2007, so it is quite dated. And we heard that from the board and from the public as well. So what the board did this year, in January of this year, they have directed that we proceed with comprehensive updates to each of the 6 electoral area OCPs over a multi-year process. That will start with South Long Beach, and the South Long Beach OCP boundary is really south of the Long Beach Airport and encompassing the west side of Barclay Sound around Port Albion area, Millstream, and Hitatsu. So less impact on Tofino, but I think there's a lot of shared services and shared opportunities on the west coast that we look forward to discussing. The other big project focus for us is the Banfield Development Plan, which will look at existing OCP policies and zoning that we have out there, and identifying servicing capacity for growth and what we might need to do in terms of water and sewer And a lot of the things that Tofino has been working on for decades now, I feel like Banfield is at the beginning stages of that. So we're gonna investigate the needs of, what we need to do on the servicing side to accommodate growth. And then that'll lead into the OCP update for Banfield as well, which will look at what the next 20 years will look like. And then I guess the last thing I'll just touch on is the housing policy updates. So we do need to, like everybody else in the province, we need to update our zoning to align with the provincial small scale multi-unit housing legislation. What that means for regional districts with a sewer servicing, which we don't have anywhere, will be secondary suites in all of our residential zones with no minimum lot size. We do allow for accessory dwelling units on lots that are 1 acre or larger right now, but we will be expanding that, and that might have an impact on the Clayoquot Sound area in certain zones. So we'll have to look into that as we dive into that project first half of this year. And then finally, the housing needs reports. So we'll be updating our 6 housing needs reports by the end of this year. In 2021, we went through a collaborative project where we worked with our West Coast partners in Tofino and Q&amp and the First Nations out here to work together on the original housing needs reports, which were adopted in 2021. So we will be upgrading those, making them more robust, incorporating the new servicing capacity requirements that the province is looking for, and the 20-year timelines, and I think 50-year timelines as well on those ones. So if there's an opportunity for us to work together with our West Coast partners on updating those reports before the end of the year, we'll look to do that as well. I think that is it for planning. Happy to take any questions now if anybody wants to, or you can hear from Terry.
Just a quick comment on the zoning bylaw review process that is currently at the ACRD. We'll be going through that process ourselves. And I just want to comment that the amount of consultation and the work that's being going is phenomenal. And there is a lot of interest in that process. So I expect we'll see the same here in Tofino as we go through that process. Great, thank you.
All right, West Coast Transit. I'm not an expert in this service, but I think I can give you guys most of what you need and maybe take back some questions. But so West Coast Transit, we've been trying to get this service on its feet since 2019. BC Transit is still not at the table. So in 2023, the board decided that we needed this service anyway, so we are going it alone. So they have developed the stops and the map, and we have a lead proponent that the contract we're basically just at the final stages of finalizing. Talking about fare discussions, which will be coming to a West Coast committee meeting here at the end of the month. The aim is to have the service implemented at the beginning of April 2024. BC Transit is still in the background. They are definitely still interested in this service. I think they are hoping that maybe it's going to be included by the provincial funding when they do their talks, I believe in April, but nothing is guaranteed. So we are at this point planning on operating this service into the future and hoping that we can convince them to come to the table. So the service will connect Tofino, Q&amp, and the First Nation communities of Hitatsu and Tyasanis. There is a working group that has been very active in helping develop the bus stops and how this is going to roll out. There is going to be a presentation. We've been using Watt Consulting to assist us in this process. So they're coming to the February 28th West Coast Committee meeting to provide a presentation of kind of where we're at. So really a lot more to come this spring as we kind of start to finalize this, and again really hoping and continuing to lobby with BC Transit to try to see if we can get their dollars to help support this system. So it's going to be about $530,000 in this first year to operate the service, and I'm thinking it's coming up to about $750,000 in the following years. So a big endeavor for the West Coast, but much needed service, and I look forward to the bus finally moving and rolling. In terms of regional parks, the map looks beautiful, the West Coast Multi-Use Path, we call it. So that last final connection that was between the junction and the national park is now completed. We looked for grant money for a long time for that project and finally got somewhere. So we're going to have an official opening here this spring, and we will provide more news about that as we get closer. We're going to wait for some better weather, but we did do that with an iced tea grant. We got some the Bike BC is what they used to be called, the transportation grant as well, and then some funding from our regional park service. So I was looking at it today and it looks great. This regional park service also has other parks and trails, the Log Train Trail in the Alberni Valley, the Alberni Inlet Trail that kind of heads out towards Bamfield, as well as Mount Arrowsmith Park. So a lot of discussion about parks with our board lately and level of service as our infrastructure is aging, and the volunteers that have tended to maintain this infrastructure for us in the past tend to be dwindling. So how are we going to maintain this moving forward and continue to leverage grant funding wherever we can for these projects? The Long Beach Airport. So Long Beach Airport passenger movements and traffic is almost up to like the 2019 numbers. We did see some good passenger movement with obviously the blip for a bit this summer with, even though it was just a road closure, it actually impacted the airport as well. We've been doing some major upgrades. That is obviously old wartime infrastructure, which is all well beyond its useful life. So right now we're doing a fire suppression upgrade to upgrade the water system out there. So we actually would have some fire flows in the case of an incident, but also provides those lease lots some better infrastructure so that they can have some services. Very strapped for cash and very aware that we are trying not to put any more onto the taxpayer. So a very interesting project was done this year with some developers who are wanting to put in some lease lots out there, and we don't have a road to get around a big gully to get to where they wanted. So a very interesting agreement where they're actually putting in the infrastructure, and then we will basically give them rent credits over probably the next 20 years, potentially, depending on what lease rates do, to pay off that. By doing that, though, they've opened up a whole new area that are potential lease lots that we can then rent out, and they would get their money back quicker, and then we would also start to earn revenue off of those lease lots. So we're already seeing interest in that, and I think it's been a very great partnership. They're excited to finally get their stuff that they were looking for, and I was excited to have some infrastructure built that I didn't have to pay for at this point. So I think it's a great model, and it took a lot of time and effort with our legal team to get to a system that works, and I think it's something we can duplicate again. Perimeter fencing. So we've had a patchwork of fencing around the airfield for a number of years, which created quite a wildlife corridor that was problematic. And so that perimeter fencing project, which was like a $4 million project fully funded by the federal ACAP program, was completed in December, or is just kind of finalizing, but was completed in December. And we continue to leverage a lot of federal ACAP funding for equipment, such as we're getting a new loader this year, and we've got a snow plow and all sorts of wonderful stuff. So that is great. It's a great partnership. They do airside infrastructure, and then we use the BC Air Access Program to kind of help leverage funding to get the non-airside stuff, such as the water upgrades. So now we're trying to look forward. We would love the goal of getting this off the taxpayer. We are a long ways from doing that, but in order to do that, we need a master plan. So the board has committed to doing that, and we've hired a planner type person to help us do that. And a big portion of that is going to be partnering with Tla-o-qui-aht. So we are on the final stages of signing an MOU with them for discussions regarding the airport lands and what the future kind of looks like. So there's some great proposed initiatives in there. They seem very interested in it. And I feel like we've got some momentum, which is fantastic, because that is really going to be our key to success. And then I guess the other component is, as those air passenger movements increase, that's fantastic, but the terminal building isn't necessarily built for that sort of increased number of people, traffic. So we are looking at an airport terminal design this year to see if we need to expand, replace, or what we would do with the terminal building. Again, it would be subject to grant funding for sure. And then just trying to maintain all that old wartime infrastructure that's full of lead and asbestos and all that wonderful stuff. So a lot of chat about this service all the time. But yeah, it's getting a great spot, and that grant funding seems to keep coming, which is fantastic.
And Karen, just maybe while we're on airport, it's a huge topic. It is, we spend a lot of time on the board. Is huge. If you look at our line items in terms of, you know, the airport is one of, well, I think it is the highest, or maybe general administration. But the one last thing on there, and it's not highlighted on there, but it's not directly related, but parking. You may just maybe touch this. Parking is an interesting conversation at the council table here. The initiation of the parking out at the airport.
Yeah, so there was a few things. We had some parking issues just because people were parking there and clogging up the parking lot, but we also are always trying to look at creative ways to create revenue. So we did partner with Robbins, and we do have paid parking out there. There is some bigger, longer term options. But again, just another tool that we can use to try to generate some revenue. It's not big, but actually it's solved more of the parking issue than creating revenue, but we'll take it at this point. So, but yeah, there's some opportunities to do some more longer term stuff, as well as like the rental car places are able to like secure themselves some spaces as well, which is key for them and their business as well. Okay, solid waste. So we have solid waste in the regional district as two services in the Alberni Valley and the West Coast, but there's some things that we are doing together, such as the solid waste management plan. There's a massive update coming with engagement to the communities. There is a solid waste management plan working group, and that is a very large focus of 2024. Following the organics diversion. So having the 3-stream implemented now for a good full year out on the West Coast, we have it in the city of Port Alberni as well. And now it was kind of time to refresh that document and figure out where we're headed next. The cost is increasing all the time. So we are looking at doing a tipping fee increase this year, but not increasing the rates for your garbage or your 3-stream bills, as well as the requisition. We're going to do it on a tipping fee basis. So that discussion will also be coming to the West Coast Committee here. And eventually a leachate upgrade for the landfill, as well as this, the West Coast landfill does need some updates in terms of the infrastructure. So the goal of both services is to try to get less than 400 kilograms per capita. I think we're sitting about 520, which was a significant reduction to where we were, but we would love to get down even further. So really focusing on that component of it. So on the West Coast service, we did actually open a organics facility. So unlike in the Alberni Valley, there actually is an organics processing facility at the West Coast landfill. We need to cover that building. The cost of the initial part of that project was so high that we were unable to proceed with the last step, which is covering it, so that it's more of a product that we can sell. So that is a project that is underway here early in 2024, so that we can start to figure out how we can sell the compost material, because it's a very needed material from my understanding out here. So we are working on that. That's probably the highlights for solid waste. I did want to touch on the Emergency and Disaster Management Act, and not that we do emergency planning for Tofino, but one of the components of that new act was the consultation and collaboration with Indigenous governing bodies and the coordination. So I know that our Protective Services Manager has already been in contact with the counterparts here on the West Coast, and they're trying to talk about an approach that might potentially be a bit more collaborative in how we're going to do that. So I think the new legislation is going to have us consulting and collaborating even more than we already were, which actually was quite a bit. We've done a lot of training activities collectively, but is having us focused even in that same direction. So the emergency 911 telephone system is paid through the regional district, and we partner with other regional districts on the island to form a corporation, which is kind of ran by the Comox Valley Regional District. The Next Gen 911, which is going to give you the ability to text and locate and all that wonderful stuff that is federally mandated for 2025, is a big challenge for us because we now have to ensure addressing and location and all these things that have never really been cleaned up. So as the regional district that provides that service, we need to guarantee that the addressing in Tofino that we are then providing to the Comox Valley and they are providing to Ecom is accurate. And we do not do house numbering for Tofino. There is some areas we do it for, some areas we don't, some who don't really do it except for maybe on the napkin on the side of their desks type approach. So that's going to be a focus of ours this year, is getting that GIS kind of system up to date and then figuring out how that flow of information is going to come. Is Tofino going to do it on behalf of them? And if so, how often do we need that information to live up to the agreement that we need to sign, and how is that going to? So something that we haven't, a service that we haven't really focused on all that much at the regional district because it's kind of just operated on its own, has definitely going to be taking some more time as this new, which I think is going to be a fantastic system and much improve our 911 services. However, it is a lot of work between now and then. And then general government. So general government is kind of the all-encompassing thing that doesn't do the services. So it has asset management, administrative services, human resources, IT, records management. The health network is run through there. Then our general bylaws and policies and grant programs. So this is a service that we are seeing some growth in over the past couple of years for sure, as we've had to resource up. The development of a privacy management program and continued IT improvements definitely seem to be a focus. One of the other areas that we would really like to focus or create this year is portable IT equipment. We do have the opportunity to come out and borrow the council chambers here to have live stream meetings, but we don't have that opportunity everywhere. So we are looking to try to get some portable equipment to kind of do that. But I would say the IT focus of this service is the main one this year, is those cyber risks and everything continue to escalate. It is becoming more of a concern for us. And then asset management, we continue to build our asset management program mostly with grant funding. We have a lot of success in our grant applications. But it is still a big area of focus. The health network is something that technically we run through here. It is not funded by taxpayers in any means. It is funded by Island Health. It is a great network that has been active now, I think, for about 10 years. And Island Health has thankfully sounded like they're going to continue to support it into the future. So it's a very big key as we are looking to lobby, including lobby things moving forward.
I could just maybe touch quickly on before the 911 is a huge one, but the grant programs, which was your line item there, just to give you an example, was over, I believe, over $500,000 this year that had been asked of the ACRD region. And we're looking at maybe having a more fulsome conversation about how we look at the granting program through there. There are some overlapping grants, and that's something that that Terry will bring to herself, the West Coast Committee. Where you're looking, there are several organizations on the West Coast that will apply to different, and we have a no double dipping rule. And so some of those grants we're going to have to look at. Because they're all wonderful organizations, this year it was a huge job at the ACRD to go through that process. And I think there's some room for reform there in that process, as we did in Tofino here. Through the granting process. So I'll bring that up just because it's a huge amount of work. I think there was 48.
Yeah, there was 48 applications this year, and our policy right now is very open, and it was drafted in that manner by the board of the day, that they wanted flexibility to be able to consider applications from all these different wonderful nonprofits. But there's no cap on application amount. There's really, besides the fact of being not-for-profit, there isn't really a gap or a criteria as to what you even need to be focused on. So, and then with a regional district format and trying to determine who benefits from these services, it becomes quite contentious at the board table and creates an interesting meeting. So there's definitely some interest now to create a little bit more solid policy and some criteria that would probably be vetted by staff prior to it getting to the board. but yeah, that's still in progress. I would say in terms of our existing grant applications that are sitting there, we only got through probably 2/3 of them. And then we are looking to try to create a policy that will work for us moving forward, that will make that a little more streamlined, I would call it. So, yeah. And then the hospital district. So the hospital district is a separate legal entity. Historically, or we pay for 40% of capital funds required for hospital facilities in the region. Historically, those hospital facilities have only been the Tofino General Hospital, the West Coast General Hospital, and the Bamfield Health Center. Island Health is now requesting funding for some of these facilities that are kind of outside of that traditional model, such as the request this year, which was shocking from my end, but apparently discussions that have been happening in the background, was 2.8 million for the Q&amp Primary Care Center and 1.8 million for the Tofino Staff Housing and Sobering and Assessment Center, which is a very long name, and I hope they figure out a revised name for it moving forward. So those have not really had a whole lot of discussion, actually any discussion, I'd say, at the hospital district board table, because we're just trying to line up Island Health to come and talk to us. So it's an interesting time for the regional hospital district because to date, those have all been 100% provincially funded projects. And now they're asking the local taxpayer to take on a share of those projects. So it's an interesting time in the fact that other regional districts are, and it really is different across the whole province. Different health authorities are asking for different contributions from different local taxpayers, and there's no like set funding model. So it's very confusing. But also, yeah, so a balancing act. We want to support these projects, and we definitely see the need for these projects, but do we want the local taxpayers helping to fund them, or are we concerned if we don't fund them that the province won't proceed with them, and all those discussions? So I think everyone, including all the health authorities across the province, would love the province to look at their old Hospital District Act, which is very old and outdated, and even to get these projects funded, the health minister would have to designate them as a health facility, but seems to be designating a lot of these type of projects. So needing to, I think, have an overall look at that, but it doesn't really seem to be something that's on their priority list. So in the meantime, how do we deal with this at a local level and continue to support these amazing, much needed initiatives and at the same time protect the local taxpayer? So we have Island Health, I think, coming on March 13th now. We're just trying to finalize and get a bit more information from them. Such things as like, we've always provided a 40% share, but I think that's negotiable potentially, but I don't like it's all very tricky. So we're just kind of heading down that path with this board and having a chat about what are they wanting to expand into, if any, or are we just going to continue to lobby and hope that these services are provided without the local fund share. So on the other component of that, we had started to build a reserve fund for the Tofino General Hospital, as they are definitely starting to get to the point of, I think concept planning, they call it. So that is finally on the top of their priority list, which is fantastic, because for a number of years it was kind of like, we know it's there and we know how to get to it, but it's not a priority, but it is a priority for them now. So looking forward to that. And we are trying to build a bit of a reserve fund to help offset the borrowing that will occur when that facility is actually built. But now projects such as these other ones may be swooping in to kind of do that. But in a hospital district format, borrowing is, and we are able to do that. So it would never hold up a Tofino General Hospital project by any means, but it would just help the taxpayer in the end. So, and I think,
Terry, if I could, just before you move on that, just so that the council understands how I think maybe in your slideshow, but the regional hospital district is only on capital projects, and you explained traditionally we think of those as hospitals, and now with the inclusion of the primary care center and the sobering and assessment center here, those are capital projects, but historically We haven't viewed them as the responsibility of the province and the Ministry of Health.
Yes.
So it is an important distinction. We don't pay for operating, but we certainly and the commitment from the regional hospital district in terms of the reserve fund, as an example, there's been and it's 40% that we contribute, 60% from the province. There's been no question about the commitment from the regional hospital district board around that commitment to the Tofino General Hospital. I just want to have the board know that's never been an issue. And the reserve, as an example, you may be familiar, our group here, with the $6 million for the West Coast General emergency room operations, where once again the regional hospital district contribute, not quite because there were some contributions from the foundation as well, but approximately 40% there. That was borrowed, and then that money was repaid, and in essence we're taking that payment and putting it towards that reserve. So the point of all of that is there's been a very strong commitment from the regional hospital district board to the delivery of healthcare out to the West Coast here.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, it's just different because like Capital Regional District is really dabbling into these other sort of models. And other regional districts are just putting their foot down and saying, no, the traditional hospital model is the only thing we're interested in funding. And that doesn't necessarily mean the projects don't go or do go. So it's just, it's an interesting time for, and I definitely get where Island Health is coming from. They have a limited money coming, and anytime that they can try to add to that pot is going to help them do other projects in other areas. So yeah.
Yeah, just a quick, as well as Mayor Law has his hand up there. Mayor Law, go ahead.
Thanks, through the chair. Just a quick comment. The Island Health request for the Q&amp Primary Care Center and the Tla-o-qui-aht, that would be the acronym for the Sobering Assessment Center. That request really did come out of left field. Just a comment. You mentioned that there was indication there had been discussions in the background for this funding. Who was in? Do you know who was involved in those discussions, or how they came about, or any parties? Was it was the province involved besides Island Health, or is there just?
I think for us, like, I wasn't aware of this project existing at all. I had never even heard of it. I do understand that our CAO had heard about it through, I think, District of Tofino Council, and that you guys have been involved in that discussion. It just hadn't come to our hospital district board table. Our hospital district board is interesting because it's just the capital contribution for those hospital facilities. We don't tend to get into that general discussion very much. And Island Health had presented to us in January, I think it was this year, maybe in December. But they had talked a lot about the Tofino General Hospital and where they were at with that. And maybe it was too pointed of a question as to what we asked them to come delegate about. But again, they hadn't really brought up this facility at that time. So yeah. And then the Q&amp Primary Care Center, like District of Q&amp had talked about going on this on their own at one point a few years ago, and there's been many models. But again, the Island Health communication right now, we don't have enough of it with all these things that are going on in our area. So we did have a big discussion with them from a staff to staff perspective about that the other day, and how are we going to make sure that these things don't come as a surprise during budget season.
Super. And just through the chair, just a clarification on my question. It was about just the funding option. So the hospital district didn't hear about the projects really, or the funding option until all at once. And certainly the funding option, it was news to me. Thanks.
Yeah. The letter.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Law. And it does lead to conversations we've had with Island Health, and communication has been a challenge for many years. I think we're making better progress with time. We meet every year at UBCM, but communication has been a challenge for sure. So thank you for that. Oh, and we did contribute, like, the new CT scanner at the regional hospital district. That was a $2 million investment, a highly needed piece of equipment that is there that will service the West Coast as well. I'll shut up.
Yeah, and I guess for me, I like before we have the board make the decision, I also kind of need to know like what services are in the Alberni Valley that they would potentially be coming for capital contributions if they need to replace. Like in the Alberni Valley, a lot of island health services are incredibly spread out into different little pockets. And if they decided to move it together and make one kind of healthcare facility in the Alberni Valley, then what would that number look like? And like, are these projects kind of the one and onlys, or is this just kind of the potential of what's coming towards the board? I think we just need to have more discussion about the direction and where we want to go. Okay, and then the not so fun slide. So this is the 2023 requisition to the 2024 requisition. And yes, the increase is quite substantial. So 22% from prior year. So I'm trying to do math in my head quickly, but it's about 300,000 and 261 of that is based on West Coast Transit. So for the most part, things are relatively the same. Grant needs will likely change as we do have some more on the table that we need to make decisions about. But there is some fairly substantial increases in there this year, but mostly all related to West Coast Transit. So how we proceed as a board now is we kind of go through and we talk about each of those services. Yesterday, we provided the board an entire overview of the whole financial plan with everybody sitting there. And now we try to get together the people that are members of that service and we talk about what's involved and what are some ways if we want to reduce what those are and what would happen if we did that. And so that's kind of the next step. Yeah, and I think you already do have my slide deck because you loaded it for me. So I'm definitely happy for you guys to share it. You can put it on your website if you want to, or link people to ours. That's fine too. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Councillor Swan.
I just had a question about the transit.
Yeah.
Is there any kind of idea of what the schedule, like how many runs will be, like any estimate of the schedule?
Oh no. Yeah, do you know, Tom? Sorry,
Yeah, so there, the finalization is we're going to be presented at the West Coast Committee. I'll be able to give an update to council, but the schedule has been, they're very close to, I think, if not completed, they're going to be doing it. Watts Consulting will be coming and giving that presentation. I think it's on the agenda for
28th, I think.
The 28th, yeah. So I'll be able to give you a more accurate, but that has been talked about in detail with the amount of stops. There is the one slide that came up yesterday that had the routing, but I don't think there was any information around scheduling.
Yeah, here, I'm just gonna, they do have the routing they have the routing definitely finalized. And I did feel like I knew how many sets of trips there are a day, but I will have to email you guys that, but I can definitely get you that.
I do have a comment, Tara, and I think it's important for the board. Maybe if you could go back to the slide previous, and it's a conversation that Terry and I have had many times around how things like property assessment affects the requisitions that the District of Tofino. So in terms of the shared services that we have with our partners in the ACRD, because of the Tofino substantially high property assessments, we do pay, it could be argued, a disproportionately higher amount in terms of the exact same services that we receive. And so it's a conversation that I think, the council should have an understanding of how that affects. And I know we've worked on, so for example, transit, where we've tried to break it up into population 50% and 50% property assessment, because it's always a difficult conversation for me at the board to have that. But maybe, I don't know if you could maybe.
For sure.
Yeah.
So most of our services are on a property value tax. And when you're looking at taxes within District of Tofino and you guys have that, everyone's kind of on that same measure. So even though maybe you are artificially high, or maybe not artificially high, but you're high, but collectively as a community, everything is high because that's how BC Assessments valued it. But when we look at it across all the different regions, the range in average house price is substantial. Like I think lots of times Tofino is over double, and that doesn't necessarily represent that the house is doubly better or the wealth is double, but that is the property tax model in BC. And so it is problematic when we get to shared services because even your neighbors in Q&amp have a substantially lower average house price. And so their share of the pie is less on these shared services. It's been interesting to see what's happened over the last number of years. There has been lots of changes. The Alberni Valley as a whole has actually increased quite a bit since 2020 in terms of assessed value. So I feel like that gap is closing slightly, but it is something that a regional district does face, and it is problematic, especially in communities where you have like waterfront versus non-waterfront. Like Bamfield is another community that I would say is paying quite a bit higher than what is actually kind of sitting on the ground, if that makes sense. So we do look at it in terms of, as we develop the new service like West Coast Transit, we did put a population factor on it. So 50% of the requisition is funded by property value tax, and the other 50% is allocated between the areas on population. So that did two things for us. Our two Treaty Nation members, Tla-o-qui-aht and Q&amp, wanted in, but their assessed values are basically still next to nothing. And so it gave us an ability to tax those communities on a number that is something that we can measure. It's not just an arbitrary, okay, you'll charge 5% of the total to you. It's a number that's going to move as the community moves. So we have done that with that. In order to do that with our other services, we would need to open up the establishing bylaws. And the problem with that is anytime we go to change the apportionment method, if there's a winner, there's a loser. And so it's really hard to change those models. We've tried in a couple of services for a couple of different reasons, and we haven't yet seen one kind of make it to the finish line. So two things for me for that is that means we really have to look, if we're going to establish new services, what is the driver of those services and what is a fair apportionment model? But then continue to have that discussion about is there different ways of doing this? And if we need to open up a establishing bylaw for some reason, then we definitely should be looking at the apportionment models. So I continue to sympathize with some of the areas for sure, but the property tax model is probably it's hard to get away from.
And if just one more, we got 1 minute. One of the areas that might not be reflected and for council to understand is that the ACRD and the multiplex, the service that the ACRD, and I don't know if it came up anywhere in the slides, but it may be good for council to understand that relationship.
So we have an establishing bylaw for the West Coast Multiplex service that I'm going to say 2012 went to referendum. The establishing bylaw is for operations only. So we cannot construct the facility on behalf of the West Coast Multiplex, and we definitely cannot borrow on behalf of that facility. However, if the West Coast Multiplex Society was able to get a facility built on the West Coast, we then have the taxing mechanism to operate that service. It has kind of the discussions have kind of grown and shrunk and we haven't really heard a lot. I do know that they're doing fundraising efforts, but we haven't had a lot of consultation with them as of late. So it is still sitting there though.
Thank you. And I see Mayor Law has his hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, just a quick question about the Multiplex Society. Are you aware of any other examples where a society like the Multiplex Society is sort of the front driver and responsible for operating or for capital costs for such a project in a regional district? Or and maybe my follow-up question to that is, if the multiplex discussions start to evolve again and perhaps grow, how does it look in other areas where perhaps ACRD takes over the actual project itself, and includes the government's government voices in that? So perhaps two questions: does it happen as it seems to be happening now, would it be possible if those conversations were to grow to take over that? But just throwing it out there.
For sure. So I don't necessarily think of an arena example, but I know lots of like community hall societies have built community halls and then got to the point where they can no longer operate the community halls and they turn them into a service of a regional district. So that is kind of an example. It is an interesting model. It was a very deliberate decision by the board and the society at that time because they were confident that they could get the capital costs covered moving forward. If the board would like to proceed with a different model and like to actually contribute financially to the capital costs of that and do some borrowing on behalf of that facility, then we would have to go back to a alternate or assent process such as a referendum. And when you have borrowing attached to a referendum, we would then have 5 years, even if it was just a portion, like if the committee or the society were to commit to 80% of it and we wanted to do borrowing for 20 or something, we would then only have 5 years to basically start that project before that bylaw would not have the borrowing power that it did before. So that's an interesting thing about this bylaw for us at the regional district is it doesn't have an end date because it doesn't have borrowing attached to it. So the service is just kind of established and sitting there in perpetuity. But because there is no facility, there's nothing to operate. So yeah, it would definitely be one that at some point we're probably going to have to circle back to talk about with the society and how it's going. I think they're still hopeful, but that's a huge ask. That would be a lot of funding to gather. You got both? Yeah, I got thumbs up. We'll say that was both.
Okay. I don't see any questions or comments from council, so I would like to thank Terry and Alex for coming up here and making the trip to Tofino. It is really important that council and the community understand the relationship between the ACRD and the important services that those shared services that are provided out to the coast, and having an understanding of how that money is spent, I think is critical. So thank you very much for making
Yeah, great.
the time
Nice
to come out
of
here.
us to come out for sure.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So I'll look to our CAO. Is this a good time to break for lunch?
It is. Lunch will be here about 5 minutes. So it's probably good for us to break until 12:40.
12:40. Sounds good. We'll break until 12:40 and reconvene. 12:40. We'll get started again. Aaron, I think you're still up to bat.
Great. This afternoon's remainder of my presentations is basically sewer. So only 5 or 6 slides left. Okay, well, thanks. Lunch, whoever brought lunch, that was delicious. We're gonna reconvene with operating revenues for the sewer fund. Again, the change that we see, or the most significant change we see here again, is this charges. Although there's a 0% change because of the actual values of $53,000 when you divide it into $1.2 million, so you don't get much of a change. But I did want to highlight it because it's reflective of the lower the sewer. Our sewer budget is reflected. The sewer budget is based on our water budget and charges. So we have 90% of our sewer charges, and that's why we're seeing a reduction here in our sewer budgets. Staffing, office, and administration, we see a slight decrease. There were some costs that went up. We had some engineering costs go up. The subdivision development bylaws in there, the development cost charge bylaw, a sewer model. But because some of the staff costs could be allocated to the wastewater treatment plant, we saw an overall reduction. It is important to remember that those staff costs will come back in 2025. In terms of the lift stations, we see an increase that's related to 4 submersible pump repairs in our lift stations. So again, related back to our asset management program. And finally, we see an increase in our sewer projects, which is related to our infiltration and flow program, which is currently underway. And that was, so that's currently ongoing. That's it for the operating revenues and expenses. I think pause here for any questions before I get into the projects. So again, we won't discuss unless asked about any of the projects that have had no changes. We haven't deleted or deferred any projects. There are some changes to the sanitary collection system model, as well as South Force Main. In terms of the sanitary collection system model, we've rescoped that project and reduced the overall cost. This project is a mirror of our water pumps. What it is a digital model of our hydraulic system that lets us know what's happening. For example, if you were to propose a development of a certain size, this model would help you determine what pipes needed to be upsized and to what extent. And that's the kind of cost that can be apportioned to the developer. Also allows us to know, if we replace a sewer pipe with a different sewer pipe, how that'll affect our overall project. So as we go through project development, construction, we always will refer back to the model. It's constantly updated.
It's not directly with sewer, but like when we get a servicing brief, for example, and we ask about water and sewer, this is what the information you would be providing us through there, and like water, for example, when sizing pipes and all those. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. Right, Councilor Stere, the water model allows us to go and plug in a development and determine what any concerns that we may have. We don't actually have that for our sanitary collection model, and so it requires a significant amount of engineering effort on both our side and on the developer side to fine tune that for each development. What pump station is affected by there, would it look downstream? We have a model which should be able to plug this in, turn around development, make development a lot quicker, and it also makes it affordable. It gives us better information when we're making this. Thank you. The South Tofino Force Main project. So what we've done here as well is rescope this project and took out the capital portion and looking in 2024 to just undertake the design work. The main driver behind this change is that while that 5.8 million number came out of a number of reports we've had done over the last 15 or 20 years, as we start to get into this project, we start to realize that it may not be as big a project as we think it might be. So there's a pipe in the ground that goes from Maltby through to the Station 7 Lynn Road. That pipe is actually sized correctly for the next 40 years. The problem we have is actually that there's pressurized system coming into it. So people all along that area, the resorts, all the development happened over the 20 years are pumping in there. And so it's a pressure issue. On top of that, we have sewer coming in from Taisanis-Sawista that's coming in at a fairly high level as well. And then we have a system, a receiving station that's undersized and underpumped. So what I'm trying to say, long story short, is we're not sure twinning it makes sense in terms of value. I think we may be able to approach this in a different way that would allow us not to have to twin this line and perhaps use what we have. I don't know if that's the answer yet. All I know is that it's not necessarily twinning anymore. And so we want to spend some time to make sure we know what the project is before we start putting these $5.8 million numbers in front of council and the community. So in 2024, we'll do the design work, and you'll see me up here next year talking about what it might look like in terms of a capital project. It has to get done. Something has to happen there. We're in an issue there, but we're not quite sure what it is. And this is a section of my presentation where I can answer some of the outstanding questions from council at the last meeting. One of the questions we had was, what are our value of our sort of mechanical repairs versus electrical repairs? In the end, for 2023 anyways, we pulled out as much as we could, got down to as much detail as was possible. And it turned out that electrical and mechanical repairs are both about $90,000. Fleet is still ongoing. The in front of council, the financial plan that has a fleet. Our best guess of what fleet's going to cost us over the next 5 years That will be updated though, prior to the final version of the budget. We're currently finalizing the development of an asset management plan for fleet, so we'll be able to hopefully present that to council at the next meeting is our goal anyways. Right now, we're comfortable with the existing CNI levy allocation for fleet, but again, once we have the asset management program, we can go back and look at that to make sure that that number is right. And again, it will be updated for the final version of the budget. The neat thing about fleet is it's small enough and manageable enough for us to develop it as a pilot project for asset management program. So we'll be seeing an asset management plan for fleet. We'll see an asset management plan for equipment and asset management plan for water, sewer. As we wanted to start small to make sure we have the process in place, and then we'll move through those in the next couple of years. We are using, even though we don't have the plan, we are using the reasoning behind the plan to develop the budget that council will see. Boat operations. This is a 2-slider. Boat, the requirement for boat and the boat conversation is an annual event at the District of Tofino budget conversations. In terms of what's happening now, we have a boat that has very little freeboard. And I speak frankly here, it has very little freeboard. And when we put 2 people in with gear or 4 people in, we all have to lean the opposite way the boat's going when it goes around Nielsen Island. So we have a boat that I'm not comfortable sending our staff on in anything but the most flattest of flat days and the least windy of days. As we move forward with our asset management plan, we're going to be on Mears Island quite a bit more, inspecting our dams, which are currently not being inspected more than once a year, inspecting our source water sources, raw water sources, I should say, are making sure that we can get to our assets, monitoring our outfall at the sewer on the sewer side, annual pipeline inspections, and obviously emergencies. So we're going back and forth to Mears Island quite a bit, and we're going to be bringing more and more gear depending on who's going over and doing what. The asset management team took all the information about what we think we're going to need, and they came up with a number of 200 hours per year. We took that 200 hours per year and we extended it over a lifespan of a new boat of 15 years. So what we tried to do here, and this is not necessarily just a lifestyle cost analysis because we're comparing apples to oranges a little bit. So boats are capital project or capital items. A service is something different. So you have to find a way to compare those. And so what we did was we looked over 15 years. We looked at the cost of a new boat. We added in the cost of the boat, the operations, the maintenance, and the fuel and the insurance to come up with an annual capital cost for the boat. And then we broke that down to per hour costs so we could do some comparisons. And again, this is based on the 200 hours per year that we expect that we're going to be using the boat. And so the table will tell you that a new boat will cost less than a used boat, and both will cost significantly less than a contracted boat service. The difference between the new and the used boat is primarily to do with less maintenance because we have a newer equipment and a better residual value once the item comes end of life in 15 years. So I'm happy to have the conversation about boat, but I wanted to get at least some numbers in front of council from the asset management team. This is sort of distilled down from a 4 or 5 page report I read, so I was trying to figure out a way to explain this the easiest in front of council today. Councilor Swin.
Well, I have a boat very similar to your boat, and I can understand your safety concerns with that. My question is that cost for a new boat, including like the navigation equipment?
That's fully kitted out for, yeah.
I do have a couple questions, as you might have expected. You have no trust in the Marine Search and Rescue Services? That was the first one. And I'm interested, of course, in at a contracted boat service of roughly 500,000 at 200 hours. I'd love to see the quotations, and so I'll probably get you a better deal. But so when you guys are making those kinds of thought processes and building a case for, you know, a piece of infrastructure. This lays it out fairly clearly. I'm just curious, you know, just as one, a used boat annual capital, you know, about $1,000 plus more. Why is that?
That would be due to the higher rate of repairs for an older engine, an older boat that I think we used a boat that was 8 or 10 years old, so it just incurred more costs as something get older. We all know boats don't get any cheaper the longer.
Well, they are a hole in the water to throw your money into it. Absolutely. That's why I'm always cautious about any a boat piece of infrastructure, having had many over the years. And so that I was just curious, because my first thought, and then you brought the slide up, is that, you know, would this not be a service that we could contract out that would be more cost effective? And your numbers show clearly that wouldn't be the case. I'm just curious as to that contracted boat service number of $500,000. I know the school bus service, for example, is way less than that, and that's a daily service, as an example.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I'd have to delve deeper into the report, but from what I understand,
I can see our CAO has got her hand up. Yes.
I just have a couple comments on the asset and service cost, because that's the total cost over a 15-year period. Is my understanding, and then the annual capital is capital only. So if we're purchasing a used boat at 75,000, the service life is going to be shorter. So we're amortizing it over a different period of time than a new boat, which will last longer. So it spreads out the cost over the service life. But the contracted boat service, I believe we looked at it over a 15-year.
yeah, the boats are over 15 years, and I believe that contracted boat service is something very similar. So it's not $495 a year.
Okay.
And the other item, I mean, there's a number. I would really like to get back to the asset management team to maybe email this out to council. But part of this is also owning the equipment that we need to service our infrastructure on our timelines versus part of the reason a contracted boat gets so expensive is because you can call at any time of the day. So if I have to call up at 5 o'clock on a Friday, my costs or our costs go up significantly as we try to bring people in or out, make sure there's drivers available. And for us, we have staff that we pay 7 days a week. They're on shift. You know, we if they're outside those hours, we pay overtime. So I think that's part of it as well. The contracted boat service, like many other services, like parking, tend to be more expensive in the private sector than if you were to do them yourselves. So again, we were talking about parking earlier today, and you know, parking comes in at $407,000 a year of a contract. In lieu of that, having that contract, we don't have to worry about certain other things, you know, bylaw enforcement, ticketing, and it's taken off our plate, so that's nice, but it comes at a cost. Contracted boat services, we know there's few. I think this is based on one. Is that boat service still going to be there next year? Will it be the year after? Will it be the year after? So again, just even though it's showing it's more expensive, there is obviously more risk in that in terms of who's around one. So yeah, from our initial plans, we don't think going to contract boat service is the correct way for us to move.
Thank you.
What's the annual capital cost on the contracted boat? I don't understand why there would be one at all.
We were just again trying to compare apples to oranges. So if we were going to use a boat for 200 hours a year, like we have to give them something to say how much is your quote going to be. So we say if we use our boat 200 hours a year, what's that cost look like for us? That's basically how we determine this.
Okay. Can we get like $50 for the old boat?
So part of it means we will sell the old boat. So hopefully look at an auction in months to come and purchase a lake boat. I can say that council tour to Mears Island will be easier with a bigger boat. I can hand this over now. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mayor and Council. Through the chair, we talked a little bit earlier about the budget approvals. So this is our resolution for council's consideration to go forward the first batch of two of early budget approvals.
So what I'll do is maybe I'll put the motion onto the table, if it gets seconded, then we can have a discussion if there is any. And I'll move from the chair that the following early budget requests be approved. 100, we can all read it there. Do you need me to read out everything there? I think we can all read it. Thank you. Seconded. Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Any discussion on those early budget approvals? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Seeing none approved, none opposed, motion carried.
Great, okay, I think our next, earlier in the piece, we were talking about bringing back the Growing Communities Fund discussion, so now's probably a logical time for us to do that. Again, just refreshing council's memory, infrastructure and amenities, and it's one time a grant, so it needs one time or one-off costs. So I think what we'll try and do is put up a spreadsheet so that everybody can keep track of the math as we debate.
I think we were all happy to see the air filling station funded. There'll be maybe one on the side.
I think we could probably start quickly with that one, yeah. I'll look to the rest of council, and Mayor Law, I see you up there just in case yeah, excellent. Councillor Thomas has brought up I think there is a fairly uniform agreement on the air filling station. Would that be something that we could pop that 70,000 in? Start making our.
I would want to go the full amount for the ball fields.
Okay, let's plug that in. And then maybe we can we'll plug it in, and maybe I think maybe then we can have, if our totals come over top, then maybe we can have a further discussion.
I think Dan.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Councillor. Dan, go ahead.
Just a comment on the ball fields. I believe that number may come down depending on SD70 contributions, and I think there's probably also some opportunity for contributions besides this for that project. So just something to think about. I think the ball fields, personally, I think the ball fields are a great opportunity for maybe some public fundraising, and which would leave us more money to go towards recreation facility, which I think we all are very much in favor of, or other recreation projects besides the ball fields. That's my 2 bits. So personally, I would suggest dropping the ball fields down to something like 400,000, which would leave 500,000 for community recreation facility or other community recreation projects.
Thank you, Mayor Law, and I'll look to our CAO because I just have a quick question, because the 695 figure is one that had been presented. And I think there was going to be further conversation about potentially a more refined number, but maybe not available at this point in time.
Thank you, Councillor Stere. Yeah, at this time, we're unsure how low that number will go. We do know that there will be some kind of contribution, as well as in-kind contributions which will bring down the overall cost. What we can do, and I mentioned this earlier, is that the funds will remain in the Growing Communities funds until we have a better sense of where these numbers will land, how we proceed with Bay Street, for example. We know with great certainty that we do need to purchase the air filling stations, but outside of that, I think we have an opportunity to maybe say, we'd like the funding from Growing Communities to support the ball fields. If less is needed, we can certainly move those funds, or if we find alternative sources of funds, we can move the balance into the community recreation facility reserve. But we won't finalize any of those numbers until we have a better sense of where that project will land. That will give staff the ability to proceed with that project, continue to work with SD70, and then come back with more refined numbers when we have those, which will hopefully be at that March 13th meeting. And then it'll bring sort of greater certainty. So this isn't the last time we will discuss it, but I think conceptually, we just really want to know which areas council is okay with the sources of funds going to, or with the Growing Communities funds to be allocated to.
Okay. Mayor Law, maybe I'll just quickly and then come back. Mayor Law, is that, are you comfortable with us moving that direction?
You know what? I definitely hear the that full number should go in the ball fields. I remain that we should not earmark that specifically at this time because of the potential for community and ST70 contributions, which I think are very likely. That is a very community popular project, and I think it'll get a lot of support outside of this fund and taxation, etc. So I really do. That's my opinion. You know, I kind of stick by it. But I hear, you know, if we could somehow, as Ms. Atiana says, keep it in the Growing Community Reserve Fund. But again, if we say that we're going to put all of the money there, then it's far less likely that that we'll find partners for that, because that money will be there already, and then you know, for other projects that we have on the go, we'll have less money. So that's my opinion.
Maybe I'll respond.
However that works is fine.
Yeah, second, maybe, but Councillor McMaster, you did have your
The reason I wanted to put the full amount towards the ball fields is it does something now and demonstrates to the community that this has been an ongoing concern. I mean, it's not just ball fields, it's soccer fields, and it shows that we want to do something this year to get this sorted out. And I think the community needs to hear that. I'm happy that if it costs less, money stays in the fund and go elsewhere. But the other community recreation facility, I don't think the community will understand what we really mean by that at the moment. So I think the ball fields is something concrete. Well, actually, it's grass, but.
Thank you, Councillor McMaster. Councillor Sore?
I also agree with that, just being that even though there is opportunity for community fundraising, that could take years. And we have use of this money now and don't want to wait 2 years to see the ball fields get rebuilt.
So I'm sensing and I just, maybe I'll go back to what Tatiana had spoken about, you know, in terms of a general direction for council to indicate to staff that the fact that this will remain within the growing community fund allocation, it gives them a better sense of where our priorities lie. I would look to the rest of the council. I know Mayor Law has expressed his opinion. I'm hearing from support in terms of remaining it in there. Are people comfortable with the explanation given by CAO in terms of the growing community fund, where it will sit, and our ability to allocate funds as would be necessary? So if it does come in at whatever the number is less, we're obviously hoping that there is some flexibility within there. Would that be a general support? I look to council. I've seen heads nodding.
Can I make a comment, Chair?
Yes, of course.
Right now, what we're seeing before us is Community Recreation Facility Reserve Fund, right? That's the reserve fund, is at 0. And then there is a remaining balance. I would like that corrected for this slide. Does council want the Community Recreation Facility Reserve Fund to be 0 from this, or do they want the balance in there?
I'll look to see. I think that's what we were going to move forward with. Mayor Law was that the remaining, it would be, we can stick it in that community recreation facility. There may be further conversation around. Maybe some of us would like to see the Bay Street water treatment upgrades, but anyways, that I'll leave that for a second.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to clarify that reserve fund does have a balance in it existing. I understand that Mayor Law was speaking to the remaining balance up there, but we do have funds from prior years, paid parking surplus, that will be going into that reserve fund. If staff require more funds than council is able to allocate here today, we will have to look for another source to make sure we can tender the project. We will be able to come back to council again at the March 13th meeting to firm up those numbers. That's an opportunity to revisit these allocations and also talk about potentially other sources of funds that we may need to access. Where we would be looking outside of growing communities is likely paid parking surplus. And that would be the discussion we bring forward at that time. We do need to firm up the numbers in the discussion with SD70, so we need a bit more time. We wish we had sort of more solid numbers today. But I just, you know, for the purposes of today's discussion, we just need to generally know where the support is for allocating, and we'll bring back more firm numbers prior to making any decisions or tendering the project at all.
Mayor Law, I just saw you took your hand down. Did you have another comment there, Mayor Law?
No, that was just I just wanted to clarify that, you know, not having a number in a certain, you know, a certain line item did not mean it was zero. So it sounded like that's what we were going to vote on. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Thank you. I'm sensing the conversation around council table. I was going to be advocating for the Bay Street water treatment upgrades, further allocation there, but I'll go with what's on the board, having had the explanation from our CAO on the growing community fund allocations. So are we comfortable with what we're seeing, or I mean, there was a door that was open by our CAO in terms of the other categories. We would have to go out and search for other funding possibilities, but was there anything else anyone wanted to add in the other categories at this time? Wasn't anything that jumped out in the initial conversations with folks, so I don't see anybody raising hands, so we'll leave it there. Is that staff? Is that enough information at this point in time? Great, we can move on.
Great. Okay, yeah, if we can just pull up the, we're in the PowerPoint. Thanks, Keegan. Okay, financial plan overview. In your budget package, you had quite a lot of documents. We got these out to you on Friday last week, just in recognition that there is a lot to go through. We're going to spend most of our time looking at focus our time on the first two. So the 2024 consolidated budget, that's the one-page summary that's got colors on it. And then the second one, the draft financial plan, that's the line by line detailed version of the budget. Okay, so this is a high level view, like a top line view of where we're at for the general fund. We are going to dive into more detail in a number of these different areas, but just on the high level, the general fund, we have put in a 6% tax increase on base level taxation, and we'll get into exactly the math there for the base level taxation, translating to a 4% overall municipal tax rate. Draft 2, using those assumptions, the 1% today is not balanced. So I just want to emphasize that. Using that, in assuming the 2023-2027 financial plans base level taxation for 2024, using that assumption, draft 2 is not balanced. The contingency is set at 180,000, and the capital and infrastructure levy, the CNI levy, is just under 2 million. This is unchanged from consistent with prior years. And the general fund, I put subject to change there, just so council can be aware and remember that the assessment values are all subject to change because we have not yet seen the final revised rule yet from BC Assessment. Just for completeness, we did touch on this earlier, but these are the water and sewer rates as well, just to be complete. But focusing back on the general fund, let's take a look at that 6% tax increase on base level taxation, translating to an overall 4.08. How that works is we have our base taxation. So that's the existing properties that were here in 2023. That existing, those existing properties form our base taxation. The District of Tofino is a little unique in the way that it has separate tax rates. It has what we call the base taxation rate. And then we also have the CNI levy and the debt levy showing up as separate items. on the tax notice. So when we take that 6%, that existing property tax base is approximately, just rough numbers, $4 million. We add to that the capital and the C&I levy and the debt levy, which is about 2 million. And that's a flat amount, and that has not changed. So the upper number has changed gone up by 6%. The middle number has not changed. When you combine those two together, you end up with an overall consolidated rate of 4.08. So I'm just going to pause there and see if there's any questions or comments or confusion on that. Excellent. All right. You guys were smarter than I was the first day I was here.
Well, we've had a lot of firm background in the past, so on this particular person.
Fantastic. Okay. So I just want to point out that the 4.08 is what we would use as a comparative to other municipalities. We should put those two together if we're looking to compare apples to apples to other communities. And we do have some preliminary 2024 ranges coming up for staff for other communities. So keep that in mind. We'll see that slide in this section in a couple slides from now. So translating that graphic into the actual numbers, you can see there's the base level taxation at the top from 2023, 4.1. 6% increase on that base gives us what we see in 2024 level for the adopted financial plan. So that's the $4.425 thousand $2. Take note of that number. You're going to see it in the consolidated budget. We're going to come back to that number a number of times. To that, we'll add our non-market changes. Council saw the non-market change in December 5th. So this is the estimated amount of taxes that may come from that. Again, we're working with the completed roll, not the final revised. And we will be seeing that final revised roll at the end of March. Add to that the C&I levy and the debt servicing, and that's where we land for 2024 municipal taxes. That's our assumption of going into the 2024 plan. Okay, just going to pause there. Okay. All right, draft number 2. As we said, draft number 2 is not balanced. You'll see in your consolidated budget package, and I'll just put a little snippet up there so you can see what I'm referring to. You can see that we have draft 2 is landing more than the 4.425 figure that we have for 2024 taxation. It's coming in more in the order of about $5 million. And so we're looking at a $679,000 difference. So what that means, we have 679 to go to balance. Just as context, on December the 5th, that figure was 794,000. So, and I think a number of the directors spoke about some of the changes that they made in their budget. The staff have been working over January to bring that figure down. So we're now sitting at 679. That's where we're at. Now this is pretty key, so I just want to pause here and see if there's any questions, clarifications.
I don't think there will be some big questions. Where do we find this 680,000 to balance? Yeah. And I suspect that's coming up. So
that's yeah. Okay. All right. So balancing the budget. There are 3 levers that we can pull. We can pull any one of these levers or even a combination of the 3. So just as a high level explanation of each of them, we can tap into our surplus reserves, bring those funds into 2024. We could consider cuts to budget. That's another lever that we can pull. Or we can readjust the tax level to reflect the new estimates that we're seeing for the budget. We are going to take a deep dive into each one of these things. We've got some data points that we can fill council in on for each of the sections. So we'll start off first with the surplus. So we have the surplus balance in the general fund. We have our opening surplus. We have surplus coming in from prior years. And this would not all fit on one slide. So we're at 1.799. We'll carry that number forward. In taking in, that's our opening balance for January 1, 2024, or December 31st, 2023. And then we have a number of allocations that are coming out of 2024. So these planned draws and surplus, when we deduct those, the 2025 to 2028 allocations, Director of Infrastructure already touched on some of those. That's Olson Road and the South Tofino Force Main. Ends us at a balance of about $824,000 in the surplus reserve when we account for everything. So again, there's an option to transfer some amount of funds to 2024 to help balance. And of that, we have approximately 824 to do so. That's one piece of the pie. Just for completeness, here's water and sewer balances as well, $500,000 and $750,000. But these are not available for property tax for the general fund, just trying to be complete. Okay, another option, cuts to budget. So I just want to recognize the work of staff. The $115,000 reduction that we see between draft 1 and draft 2 is due to staff working to refine the budget. They were looking for cost savings, cost efficiencies, and staff also looked at grant opportunities. And some of that did actually free up some property tax and reduce the shortfall. So that's compliments to staff for doing that work. After that work, what's left? What's left is looking at the property tax funded projects or any new things that have been added or any amounts that have gone up. And you can see here we've got operating projects, about $62,000 worth of our 2024 projects are funded to the extent of $62,000 property tax, and capital projects as well, $70,000. And that $70,000 is the air filling station. So we can look at transferring that out of property tax. If we're looking to cut, this is likely where we would go. Our third lever we can pull is to reduce or to adjust our property taxes. Non-market changes, I've got that in.
Sorry to interrupt, Mayor Law.
Oh, sorry. She's down in the bottom corner.
Okay, you can carry on with the third one, and then I'll ask a question right after that.
Great. Okay. Yeah, so NMC, non-market changes, is also, it's been put in there as well in the property taxes. That is also a source for us to be able to try and balance the budget as well, is all that new non-market change on the property tax roll. So having said that, non-market changes is our first go-to for balancing the budget. After that, we'd be looking at tax rate in this section of the pie. Given the trade-offs in the other two areas, there may be some consideration of property tax rates for council to consider. Before we take a look at indicative rates, maybe we'll take Mayor Law's question.
Sure, Mayor Law, go ahead.
Yeah, through the chair, the 4.08 or whatever it is, I think it's 4.08% tax increase. Is that adjusted for inflation?
To the chair, that is not actually added to inflation. Inflation is running about 3 to 4%. So it basically is just barely keeping up with inflation.
Yeah, so that was my follow-up point. Maybe this is more for council, but really right now I think, yeah, inflation is about 3.5%. So adjusted for inflation, we're looking at, with the present budget, which is not balanced, we're looking at a relative tax increase of about 0.5%. And we just want to throw that out there.
Thanks, Mayor Law.
Great. Okay, so we have some indicative rates for comparative municipalities that have come out with some of their tax indications. And here they are. We took a look at any of the communities that had sort of stated where they thought they were going to be for property taxes. We looked at island municipalities. We had 5. They ranged from 3.5% to just under 10%. And the average of that group was about 7.5 or 7.3%. Of that group, Cumberland's the only one that has actually come out with their property tax rate. They adopted in January, and they're at 7.52%. Tofino's other corollaries are comparative municipalities would also be the RMI municipalities as well. So we looked a number of them in Vermeer, Revelstoke, Roslyn, and Ucluelet, and the RMOW, Resort Municipality Whistler. They have all, of the 14 municipalities, that was the ones that I could find that had made any indication whatsoever. They were ranging from 5 to about 9%. The average for that was close to 7%. The Resort Municipality Whistler is the only one that's really come out with a fixed number. This is part of their budget guidelines, which was adopted on the 19th of December. This is not their property tax rate, but this is their recipe for formulating their budget for 2024. So they came out with 8.2%. Yeah. Okay. So we would like to, staff on a plan for March 13th. Our intent for March 13th is to bring forward options that balance the budget. We'd like to take the time now to explore how council feels about these options so that we can bring something forward that's that's suitable for council on the 13th. So yeah, we want to hear what council's preferences are amongst these 3 levers. Do you want to see options that lean more on one lever versus another? Or is a combination of the 3? Would you like to see a combination of the 3 or favoring one or more levers? So yeah, then we'd open up the conversation.
Thank you. And maybe once again, we'll do it as a start. We'll start at the opposite end this time. I think it might be valuable to have each councillor be able to state their preferred options, potential preferred options.
I would like a combination of using some of the reserve and an increase taxes and keeping the budget as is. The reason I say that is, I mean, it's great to have a healthy surplus, but as time goes on with inflation, those dollars are worth less. So I would like to see some of that surplus spent on today's projects. Kind of support Mayor Law a little bit, that I can support putting the taxes up. But I think if we cut the budget, I've never seen a project come down in price as time goes on. So I would say, let's say if we're happy with the projects we've got and we want to do them, let's do them now. That's my feeling. So change the taxes, use some of the surplus.
I'm still just thinking on it.
You want me to skip it?
Yeah, I have kind of a stupid question. The 70,000, since that's coming from grant money, does that mean that comes out of taxation? Does that make this number now it's only 600 and something thousand?
610.
Okay, well, that's cool. There we go. We got somewhere. Yeah, it sounds like it'd be a very incremental increase to taxes. Yeah, I'm gonna muse on it.
Oh. Flip over to Councillor Anderson.
I kind of have a question about, and maybe this is a question that will come back after council input the next iteration of budget, but we've been advised often that surplus reserves are best put into a reserve fund because we have trouble building a reserve funds. So I'm a little reluctant to use all the surplus for balancing the budget. If that's still the case, that we want to, whatever, add to some of our reserves. But I'm in favor of, weighting it with surplus and taxes to balance the budget. I think staff is going to work at a few cuts to the budget as well when they go back and look at balancing it. But the weight of balancing it, I'd like to see in those 2 categories.
Yeah, I think I agree with that.
Yeah, I would be in favor of Duncan's approach of taxes and reserve. The only comment I have is thinking about that in our previous discussion about the Growing Communities Fund, is it would skew my preferences of where to allocate the funding. I would probably take the funding, or personally would try to put more onto the Bay Street project and less in the recreation center reserve fund, because if we're taking away from our reserve, I think that we should be solidifying funding then, so that we don't need to tap into what we don't have.
Mayor Law.
Yeah, through the chair, I think personally, I think if we raise the tax rates about 0.5%, 0.5%, that would cover off half of our, half of our current deficit, and then as Councillor McMaster says, tap into that reserve fund now, because I think he's absolutely right. Inflation is a double-edged sword, and things get more expensive, and our money devalues over time, and that's what I think, and that would leave very little for the staff to go back and hunt around for a little bit of extra cash here. But that would pretty much take care of it for me, and I'd be happy with that. I do have a note on transit because we're looking at our municipal budget increases as being fairly minimal, but we did see that our ACRD portion has gone up considerably, and I would have to say, if we're on the outside of this particular budget, we're taxing essentially another 250,000 for transit. Then I think that bears looking at the existing transit funds that are currently coming out of RMI that I think are actually more than that. So that's over $500,000 on transit, and it's maybe something to look at on the other side. And then if there was RMI excess, we could maybe shovel that over somewhere else. That's my one comment, is to look at some of those redundancies with transit possibly. But I'm again in favor of 4.5%, 0.5% increase in taxation and surplus.
Great, thank you, Mayor Law. I don't know if there was a comment on transit and transportation. I know through an ACRD service and some of the conversations around that $500,000, but I don't know if you wanted to comment, but we can leave it there. I think it's quite yeah, thank you. I'll just finish off with I'm in very much alignment with the conversations going on around utilization of surplus and what that amount will be. I think Mayor Law, I was trying to do the quick math myself in terms of what that percentage increase would be for property taxation. I'm always concerned about moving in that direction, as I think many of us here are. So I would like to see what that number looks like, of course. The one area that we did, give a quick mention to were some of the potential other cuts to budget, and we were great on the grants and that $70,000 coming right off the top to help. There were a couple other areas, and it's small potatoes, but I think we should maybe have a conversation. Well, I hate to say small because I like small tea. So those things like you had talked about council grants where there was we had allocated a substantial increase there, and we had talked about that phasing in process, and we may want to potentially look at that area. The other was council advocacy. There was an increase there. I think it was a $10,000 increase for the 2024 budget, and that might be. These are all just little pieces of that puzzle in terms of the budget considerations. I agree 100% around let's get those projects going, but those discretionary areas maybe is something that we could take a further look at just to lower that taxation end of things. So that'd be my comments there. And do you think that's enough information to move forward? I'll look to sorry, Councillor Thomas.
I have nothing contradicting anything.
Okay, excellent. Yes, sorry, I didn't say I was going to get back to you. So, no, go ahead.
Thank you. Just because Councillor Stere, you landed on the council budget, I just wanted to speak to the two items you mentioned, grants as well as advocacy. we have a couple pretty big topics we want to discuss with the provincial government, and I think those funds will be needed for us this year. So I feel strongly in terms of keeping those monies in the budget. The only reason staff highlighted the grants as a potential to move it out 1 year is that this year we do have 13,000 coming in for that extra grant stream under council grants from the Rec Commission. And so this may be a year where we could consider just focusing on that plus the 25,000, keeping the other two just increasing by inflation, and then moving that out 1 year to begin in 2025. And like you said, $7,000 isn't going to make a significant difference for us today, but it may help. And in addition to that, staff will be going away and having a look at operational budgets to see if we can reduce in some of the other areas outside of projects, because as we can see, there's very few projects that we could look to at this point to reduce for taxation and reduce that pressure. So we'll be going away and having a look at a few more details in addition to that 7,000. So it could start with that. But if council's not amenable to moving that every year, that's okay. We can work within that as well.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that little bit of information there. And I think keeping the 10,000 that I think is something that you've indicated will be well spent. And I just wanted to thank staff. Mayor Law's got his hand up. You're in that far left corner. I can't even see through the side. Mayor Law, go ahead, please.
Wait, Chair, you and I are changing positions. I'm usually the one, forgetting to see you. So
Yeah, I know.
it's like tit for tat. Hey, no, I just want to concur with Nyla that I'm very much in favor of keeping the council grants and advocacy fund in place, noting all of the things noted. Just thought I'd throw that in there.
Thank you, Mayor Law. I just wanted to thank staff for going back and doing the work and showing us where are those, we often ask where are those areas that we can look at to reduce taxation, because it has been an issue within the community in terms of sustainability over time. So I'm glad to see that was heard and we can see the results in what's on the board today here. So I wanted to thank staff for that obvious concerted effort to look at reductions within that area. That being said, I know my favorite part is to look at the consolidated one there, and I suspect if you have enough information from the on this, unless there was more in terms of direction from council on where you might want to look at those balancing budget pieces. Otherwise, we can move on.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you very much, Mayor and Council. Oh, now the battery died. There's an ending slide.
Oh,
Thank you. Yeah, no, I think staff have enough to work with. What I was hearing was continue to look at the budget to see if there's any other areas that we can manage to, but we have our objectives and what we want to accomplish in 2024. So let's not get in the way of that. I hear that we want to take a look at keeping the purchasing parity of those dollars, keeping up with inflation. So I think that we'll take a look at what that might look like for tax increases. And my recollection is that I think a 1% tax increase is about $40,000 revenue item. So we'll work within those boundaries. And then, yeah, we want to try and maintain our surplus reserves to have some balance there, but yeah, so we'll pull on all three levers. So, okay, great. Thanks, everybody. Yeah.
Mayor Law, yes, thank you. The team that makes this all.
I was just going to comment on my math. 0.5% to maybe I got it wrong, but 40,000 is 0.5% or 20,000. Is that right? Maybe I had it wrong. Maybe I did my quick math wrong, but
I can clarify that. So we talked about two different percentages, 6% on the base, and then overall for 4.08. So if you add 0.5 to the 4.08, it ends up being the larger number because you're including the infrastructure levy and debt on there. We go back to the base and for the purposes of tax increases and how we typically describe it, it's a percentage off of the base, but then we'll land with the bottom line number there. 4.0.
Thank you. So under 5%, I think is what I was hoping for. So I'm gonna keep it in the 4%. So that's my 2 bits.
Thank you, Marilyn. should look at the, are we still, are there still, I see next steps on there.
Yeah, so that will conclude today's presentation unless council would like to discuss any other documents that were included in the package. We can bring any of those up now, and if not, we're ready to move into closed.
I'm looking up now, seeing none. I just love the consolidated budget because I had all these great comments. I'm just joking. It was just because it's so easy for me. I can just go here and, no, that's fine. Sake of brevity. So with that in mind, we'll just look maybe quickly to Keegan over there to see if there is anybody participating online. I can see that there is nobody in the room. Is there anyone online that may have a question for council?
I can now do a open call. If there's anyone attending online who would like to make a comment or question to council, please do so now using the Q&A function on Zoom. Calling once, calling twice, calling 3 times. At this time, there's no question or comment.
Great, thank you, Keegan. So with that, I'll move from the table to go into closed session, that the meeting be closed to the public pursuant to sections 91 ACK of the Community Charter to discuss matters relating to personal information about an identifiable individual who holds or is being considered for position as an officer, employee, or agent of the municipality or another position appointed by the municipality. C, labor relations or other employee relations. And K, negotiations and related discussions respecting the proposed provision of a municipal service that are at their preliminary stages and that in the view of the council could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the municipality if they were held in public. Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Seconded. Any discussions? Negative? All those in favor? Oh, sorry, did you have a question, Ollie?
No, I thought
You're just popping the head up.
So ready.
Yeah, you are so ready. All those in favor, seeing none opposed, motion carried. We'll take